Again to another episode of the Artisans of Steel podcast. This is a conversational podcast where I talk to some of the most inspirational makers that I know of and am fortunate enough to be friends with and connected with and able to trick or convince to come in here and have conversations with me. We got a great guy today and I'm really excited to get to him. But before we do, I just want to mention real quick that this podcast is supported through my Patreon. If you look up Malmasi Fire Arts over on Patreon, you can find the Patreon. You can support at different levels. If you support at the illuminated individual levels, it gets you in here into these live conversations, to be part of the conversation, either through the live chat or asking questions to be answered by our individual interviewees and the different makers that I pull in here to chat with. And so our super sponsors that I want to mention this month are, first off, is Josh Weston. He's Josh A. Weston on Instagram, as well as at Dragon Forge EXP. That's the Dragon Forge experience. Josh is working on some really cool fabrication work right now, building one of his Dragon Forges. They're literally forges with dragons fabricated around them. They have them set up at various Renaissance fairs across the country in kind of permanent situations where you can go and forge out of the mouth of a dragon. They're very cool, really great setups. And Josh is a great guy, super creative. He is actually also working on a cool collaboration right now with David De La Gardelle. He is of course, I can say David De La Gardelle, but I can't think of his name on Instagram. Is Cedar Lore Forge. He's Cedar Lore Forge. So go check out Josh A. Weston on Instagram. He's got some great stuff going on. Next up, we have Gabe Fletcher. He is at Anchorage Forge. Excuse me. At Anchorage Forge, as well as at Anchorage Brewing. Gabe is actually going to be down in Olympia, where I'm at, in a couple weeks, taking my class. But he's also a very talented brewer. If you don't have access to Anchorage Brewing and you like beers, Anchorage Brewing makes some of the best beers I've ever tasted in my life. Go to your local beer market, and if they don't have them already, have their buyer get them in, because they're really incredible beers. And also, Gabe is doing really great work in the forge. He's a newer maker, but I've had I've been fortunate to go work with him and spend some time with him and share some of what I know and understand about knife making. And he has taken that knowledge and really ran with it. He is creating some really great mosaic Damascus patterns and forging integral chef's knives out of them. And he's just doing a really great job. He's going to be a maker to continue to watch. And I'm just so fortunate to be part of his path and his journey. So go check out Gabe at Anchorage Forge on Instagram. Next up is Lawrence Lake of Maritime Knife Supply. You can find him on Instagram at Maritime Knife Supply, as well as maritimenifesupply.com. He is a knife supplier for knife makers. That's anything from pins and rivets to handle materials to steel to abrasives to grinding machines, anvils, anything you can think of that you need for your knife making process, even etchant. He has etchant. In fact, he just got some of the new I think they're from Corin down in Australia. They're the carbide face blade straightening hammers. I can't remember what they call them, the DD knock or something like that. Let's see. I just had it pulled up a second ago. The new DD knocker. These are handheld. It's just the hammer head and just the light tapping. That's all you need. Actually, with the hammer, it does create, because it's a carbide face, creates the potential of hitting them too hard. So by holding just the hammerhead and just tap the face, that is enough impact to manipulate and help to straighten out the blade, even after it's been hardened. They're pretty handy, and you can go get them over at Maritime Knife Supply right now. Next up, we have Mr. Russell Tinsley of Ouzel Finch Beers. He's based out of Virginia. He's on Instagram as at Can't Make Knives. Although he is getting his learning on, he's trained with talented smiths like Jason Knight and Ben Breda. He's he's picking up his skills, and he's working with other people throughout who are part of the Patreon community as well as just local to him. He's doing some good work, and I'm excited to be following him and to see how he develops as a maker. He's doing great work, and he's a good dude. Go check him out at Can't Make Knives is his maker page. His Ouzelfinch is his brewing company he owns in Virginia. They're very outside of the box kind of beers. They're super tasty. I've had a few varieties myself, and while they are extremely unusual, they're extremely delicious. And again, go check out your beer market. If they don't have them at your beer market, talk to the buyer there about getting some of those Ouzelfinch beers in. Ouzel is spelled, or Ouzelfinch is Oozlefinch. You can find them on Instagram, Ouzelfinch Beers. Okay. Next up, we have Mr. Michael Poor. He is at Red Dragon Forge. Another great guy. He's actually just a little bit north of me, about 2 hours, hour and a half, depending on how fast you're driving down the highway. But he's going to be down taking that class at the end of the month with me as well. He does a lot of more traditional Japanese style knives. He does really great work. He's a really good dude. He's a very talented cook. In fact, sometimes I don't like following him on Instagram because he cooks so much delicious food and I don't get to eat it. So it's kind of difficult to watch. And so I'm excited, though, to spend some time with him. He's been a great supporter for a long time now. And I'm excited to, just spend some time with him, get to know him better, and do some work with him. So go check out Michael Poor. He's on a very good path. Mike, he just jumped in top of the morning to you into the live chat, which you can become part of if you're part of the Patreon. I'm excited to hang out with him at the end of the month. Okay, next up we have Tony Sasma. He is TNT Forge. I'm psyched for him. He just got his house-made from Brian House-made forge up and running, rock and rolling. He has some fresh billets out that look extremely clean and very uniform. He's doing a great job. He's developing more and more Damascus skills, and he's got the equipment to do the job as well. He also does a really incredible job with handle finishing and blade finishing. So he's definitely a good follow just for insight and inspiration. He actually joined us for a Q&A session a couple months back. Really great guy, and thankful to have his support as well. Again, he's on Instagram at TNT Forge. All right, next up is Mr. Eric Kidwell. He is on Instagram at District 202 LLC. He is kind of the man behind the scenes at basically the last almost 10 years of Travis Wirtz Hammer-ins, who has the camera running around, making sure everybody's got a view. Because when people are doing the demonstrations, they're kind of like hunkered over the grinder or the forge or the hammer, and sometimes it's really difficult to see what's going on. Travis is smart, and he's got a secondary screen set up, and that is connected to the live feed coming from Eric, who's running around with the camera. So if you can't see what's happening right there, Eric is getting in there up close and personal with all the different grinding demonstrations, forging demonstrations, so that you can see what's going on. And he's a great guy. He's getting on his knife making journey. He's got his shop is probably getting close to fully set up and wired up and ready to rock and roll. Again, he's a good dude. And again, he's starting his journey. He's going to be a good guy to follow. And if you get the chance to go down to the Travis Wirtz Hammer-in, which I believe is the second weekend in March, do it. It's a great event. Eric will be there for sure. And I actually might be there as well this year doing some teaching. So it'll be fun. All right. Last but not least is Mr. Dan Hubbs. He's on Instagram at 66 Mountain Knives. He is a maker of that who is not from Texas. He's from Oklahoma. And I kept getting that twisted. I'm so sorry, Dan. Watch. I probably got that messed up again. For all I know, he's from Wyoming. No, I'm just joking. He messaged me the other day. He's definitely not from Texas, at least. No, he's a good dude. He's doing some really great work. I love his EDCs. He does some really clean, nice EDC knives, which are just kind of, EDC is short for everyday carry. It's just a nice little knife that you can always have on you for whatever you need it for. But he does some really nice clean work, and he's making his own copper mine Damascus, and he's just making good stuff. He's newer maker to me. I think he's been doing it for a few years. And he's going to be, again, another maker to watch and follow, because he's doing really clean, solid work. And he actually just put out a chef's knife too recently that I thought was pretty slick. So go give him a follow. Dan is at 66 Mountain Knives. Those are the numbers, not the words. Anyways, whew, got through all the sponsors. Thank you for hanging through all that. Our guest today is a maker that I met. Oh gosh, when was this? I think it was in 2015. I wanted to take an introduction to bladesmithing course at one of the accredited schools. So I wanted to take it up at the New England School of Metalwork, because I think kind of at the time that was really, there are several locations now, but there were only maybe a couple, and I really wanted to go up to New England because that's the one I saw the most on through social media, and it looked like a good time, a cool setup, and but there were, throughout the year, I think there are a few mastersmiths teaching the introduction to bladesmithing course. And but the one that really stood out to me was Steve Culver, because his approach is very different from mine. I'm a very let's eyeball it kind of situation, where he is a much more precise maker than me, and I really was inspired by that, and I wanted to kind of see the world, or the approach of knife making, from kind of more of a machinist standpoint than where I was coming from, with basically kind of like just kind of shooting from the hip kind of standpoint and just eyeballing stuff. I met him, I took the class. There were other great students in the class I connected with, but Steve was a really great guy, and I feel very fortunate to have, and very glad that I chose to take that class, because he's been a great resource and friend. And I haven't done as good of a job as I should have over the last few years staying in contact, but I'm very thankful that he jumped in here, was willing to jump in here and have this conversation with us. I'm excited to pull him in and have this conversation. I'm going to pull him in right now, and also thank him for being part of, I believe it was the first year or the second year that I did the Artisans of Steel calendar. And he does really awesome and very clean, very inspirational work. He does his own engraving. He makes cut and shoots. Steve, how are you? We'll get into all that later. How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing great, and thanks for inviting me on. And wow,
Absolutely.
you've got some great sponsors, and I really appreciate all those folks that are supporting you. That's really awesome.
Yeah, I'm super thankful for them.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so like I said, like your work, what is it? So I started by working out for Bob Kramer. I worked for him for 3 years, and then I stepped away from knife making. And then as I started to get back into it, I was searching around through the internet, and your work was some of the stuff that was kind of repetitively coming up. And I think that's part of the reason when I took that class at the New England School of Metalwork, you were kind of top of mind out of the other makers that were offering that class or to teach that class. You were the one that was kind of top of my mind when I was going to sign up for that. And I really liked your approach, and I wanted to connect with you, because I think something that people don't really take into consideration, it is all of us have lives, all of us are busy, and while social media creates a level of accessibility, it's hard to feel like you can get back to everybody.
Yeah.
But when you've met somebody in person, you've developed a relationship, that's a different situation. And I think that was one of the things I was really looking forward to when I was getting ready to take the class with you, is that you were super talented, you're doing great work. And I was like, if I have any questions in the future, if I make a good impression, maybe he'll be able to help me with stuff. And I haven't leaned on you too much. But when I start getting into folders and playing with folders, I'll probably be leaning on you a little bit more. But anyways,
Certainly.
that's why I've been a fan of yours for a long time, and why I wanted you to be part of the conversation here today, as well as part of the calendar in the past. And so, thank you for being here.
Well, I appreciate you asking me on, and I have to say I of course follow your work, and I'm so very
Mm.
impressed with all of your work and what you've done with Damascus patterns, and that you share all this information. That's that means the world to all these people are trying to learn, and I think that's
Sure.
just awesome of you. So I'm proud of you. You're doing a great job, and
Thank you. Well, it means a lot coming from you again, because your work has been so inspiring to me that that really means a lot. Um, so to get started, let's just kind of get some of your background and your history. Like, what were you? I guess let's start out. What was childhood like for you? I mean, were you smashing on steel right away, or what were you doing as a kid?
I've always wanted to create things, and basically grew up in on a farm, and a farm provides a whole lot of construction materials.
Sure.
There's wood and steel and all kinds of stuff, and I think I had my parents terrified most of the time at what I was going to build next because it had to be something that would shoot a projectile or
Right,
burn
of
or
course.
explode or go fast, and so I was always inventing something. But I was the kind of kid that you give me a mechanical toy, and the first thing I do is take it apart to see how it worked.
I have
So
that same affliction.
yeah, so I always wanted to see how things worked. As I grew up in my young teen years, uh, I met a guy who became my lifelong best buddy. In fact, he's in Idaho, and him and his wife's going to be here at our house in a couple of days.
Oh wow!
It's it's our 50th class reunion.
Holy,
I remember when my dad had his 50th class reunion, and I could not fathom being out of high school 50 years, but here I am.
there you are.
But
Yeah.
anyway, this buddy of mine, his dad was a service manager at the local Pontiac Cadillac dealership,
Okay.
and they would get in cars on their that they would take on trade in, put on the used car lot that would need like engines and transmissions rebuilt. So
Oh
his
wow.
dad would bring them home to his shop, and me and my buddy Gary would rebuild them under his dad's supervision.
Oh
And
wow.
we're 12, 13, 14 years old, and we're
Sure.
building GTOs and Firebirds, and then if we get them running, and his dad would take us out on a back road in the middle of the night, and 2 o'clock in the morning, we got a '67 GTO doing burnouts out on a back road. So I got into cars, and I was like, well, that's kind of creative, and I wanted to build race cars, of course.
Sure.
So I took a job as auto mechanic, and I found out I didn't build race cars. I did valve jobs on some old lady's station wagon, and you know, so it was kind of boring. I mean, I worked on race cars, but so
Sure.
that didn't satisfy my creative desire. And I also did gunsmithing. I was like the family gunsmith, and there was a period in the '90s where I got laid off from a factory I worked at, and I started up my gunsmithing business. And so I thought, oh, I want to build custom guns, but and Bailey Bradshaw. I mean, if you've ever seen Bailey's work, you don't know it. Y'all need to go look at Bailey
Oh, yeah.
Bradshaw's. Yeah, Bradshaw gun and rifle. I don't remember the exact name of his stuff, but look up Bailey Bradshaw. Bailey is a master bladesmith as well.
Oh wow.
But anyway, Bailey's figured out how to make a living making custom guns. I wound up cleaning dirt out of the 12 gauge shotguns that farmers drug around behind the back seat of the pickup truck.
Oh,
So, so I got bored with that. But, it was in the late '80s. I picked up a knife magazine, and I saw where guys were making knives. And that was like, okay, now this looks fascinating
sure.
because, you know, I, I can't think of any object other than maybe guns that you can use so many different materials and so many different forms of embellishment on a
Right.
single item.
Yeah.
So that's when I got into knife making. Um, I did take an apprenticeship, a blacksmithing apprenticeship, 87.
Okay.
The state of Kansas and the State Historical Society and the Kansas Arts Commission put together a grant thing for artisans to take a 1 year apprenticeship with someone who was skilled, one of the skilled artisans in that craft. And so
Wow.
I took a 1 year apprenticeship with a guy who wound up being one of my closest friends. And unfortunately, he passed away about 8 years ago, but
Oh, okay.
he and I used to travel all over Kansas and do blacksmithing demonstrations, but that started me out on forging, and then I went to the grand opening of the Texarkana School of Bladesmithing.
Hmm.
That was 1988. That was what became the Moran School in
Right.
Washington, Arkansas. But I was there, 1988.
The grand opening.
Yeah, met all the guys there and took a whole bunch of pictures. And
Yeah, Moran. I mean, Moran must have been there, right?
oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, oh yeah. Moran, Joe Kiesler, Jay Hendrickson, B.R. Hughes. I mean,
Hmm.
everybody. And then I actually wound up taking a Damascus class that was taught by Bill Moran.
Okay.
And Tim Hancock was one of my classmates in that, and that would have
Wow.
been
I just got
90.
goosebumps. All.
Yeah, that was 90 or 91, something like that, and took Moran's class, and yeah, so Tim and I were friends for all those years,
I
and
gotcha. Oh,
yeah,
wow.
so yeah,
What a trip. Can I ask, so that was in 88. How old were you at the time when that was? Were you like in your early 30s, late 20s?
yeah, I'd have been about 30. Well, I was born in 55, so 30.
Oh, so like 33.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
33.
early 30s. Wow, what a trip. Um, I can't. It's so crazy to hear you like mention all those names and all that stuff that's happening all, and you're like kind of in the right place at the right time, right? Because you're in Kansas at the time when all that's happening.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, just to like my brain is like taking a mental time warp, a trip back to and just seeing all these people standing around, hanging
Oh,
out, and doing some cool stuff, and
it was cool. That's where I
yeah,
met Jerry Fisk, and Jim
sure,
Kroll was there. That
yeah,
was back when Jimmy had long dark hair and a mustache, and and, uh, I had a whole bunch of pictures of Jimmy, and in 2010, I did a ABS hammer in here at my shop,
okay,
and Jim and Jenny stayed here with Mary and I for several days in our house,
yeah.
and so I went and got all those old pictures of Jimmy and showed to Jenny. She enjoyed seeing all those.
Yeah,
So
who's that hippie? Jim's a
that was
great guy. I've only
oh
got to chat with him a couple times, but he's very kind,
oh yeah,
and very talented and very cool guy to meet. And he's done a lot of instructing and teaching himself, right?
yes he
Yeah,
has.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I want to back up to the gunsmithing because you talked about how you were doing the gunsmithing, but like, how did that even start? Just did it just start from you fixing and working on your own guns, and how did that progress to where you were doing it somewhat professionally, but
Well,
not necessarily to where you wanted to be because you're like you were saying you're cleaning the dirt out of people's rifles that were sitting in the back seat and stuff like
yeah.
that.
Well, yeah, I was kind of like the family gunsmith. I mean, my grandpa's guns and our guns, and so I was a family member, had mechanical aptitude, so I took care of all that.
I got you.
And then when I got old enough, well, I started buying my own guns. I love guns,
Sure.
and did reloading and taking care of my stuff. But
Right.
I got laid off. Something I left out. I spent
Okay.
25 years working at a dog food plant.
Okay. Did
In,
you
in
tell
t-
me
yeah.
Purina?
No, it
No.
was it was General Foods when I
Oh,
got
okay.
hired on. It went through Heinz and Del
I
Monte, and
got you.
every few years they'd have a forced buyout, and
Sure.
there was some years I was laid off, and then they called me back.
Okay.
But I was some of those years I was a shift maintenance man, and they sent me to school to learn machine work. So
Oh,
that's where I picked up my machinist background. Is
I got you.
the
That's
dog food plant sent me?
yeah, on the job training kind of in a way.
Yeah,
It's a good
but
way to get an education. Get your job to pay for it.
yeah, but yeah, it was great. They paid for all of it,
Yeah.
local trade school here. But anyway, I got laid off at one point. There was a period I was off. They did call me back, and I went back for a number of years, but I was like, okay, I got to do something. And I was
Right.
doing the knife making, and I had all the gunsmithing tools, and So I took a gunsmithing class and did that for a while, got hired back, dropped the gunsmithing business, just made knives
Yeah.
until, well, it was 2005. Me and the site manager of the dog food plant at the time, we got into a serious disagreement,
Oh,
and I decided it was time to walk out the door after 25 years. And I was like, I'll go home and fire up my knife making and gunsmithing business. So I
sure.
did. But after a few years of trying to run both, I had so many customers I could not keep up with both. I
Okay.
was like,
With both the
okay,
gunsmithing and the knife making.
yeah, I
I
was
got
like
you. Yeah.
doing gunsmithing three days a week, and then Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, and then Thursday I was doing knife making, and
Right.
Thursday, Friday, and Saturday knife making, and but I was getting behind, starting to irritate customers. I was like, I got to make a choice.
I know the feeling. It doesn't feel good.
Yeah, and I was like, okay, if I'm going to do one of these, which one's going to entertain me? And it
Ah,
was definitely the gunsmith or the knife making
okay.
because, like I said, the gunsmithing was, you know, I love working on guns, but that's not creative, and I
I
got to
see.
be creative. So I was like, okay, I'm dropping the gunsmithing, going to strictly knives, and so that's where I went. So that was 2005. I quit the dog food plant,
And you went full time knives.
went full time. Yeah,
Now, before we get too much farther into our conversation, I do want to talk about, because I think there are a lot of makers who have full time jobs who are maybe trying to go full time with knives. So they're doing it part time. There are some who trying to balance it, and I guess and like you said, you've been doing it since '87.
yeah.
So through that whole time, you were also still making knives. How did you? I guess what are the pros and cons, or what's not a cost benefit analysis, but just like, yeah, I guess like kind of like pros and cons of keeping the full time job and then doing knives on the side. And at what point for you personally, um, I mean, obviously there was a serious disagreement, um, but at what point, what were some of the determining factors that other determining factors that helped you make the choice to go full time? So I guess let's start with kind of like what were the pros and cons for keeping kind of a regular job, a regular W-2 job, and versus being self-employed, um, for a while you're doing your or balancing, you're still doing your knife making and gunsmithing on the side.
Well, a full time job, of course, steady paycheck, but
Yeah,
benefits, health insurance, and stuff, and
right.
that is huge. Now, I was blessed that my wife had a good job, worked for a bank, and so I was
Right.
able to get health insurance through there.
Hmm.
But retirement and stuff, now you're on your own. If you're going to put
Right.
together retirement, so you know all the steady benefits, that's really important. But over the years, I had been working on developing my knife making. I was going to shows and stuff already, so
Yeah.
I was doing that, and I was doing gunsmithing on the side anyway. So for me, I was at the point where I was pretty much prepared to just just step off into it. I was like,
I see.
I really wasn't at the point of deciding that until me and the the the, the plant manager had a
We'll just we'll just call him Dick.
well, yeah, he there was something that I was doing that I chose to do that was seriously dangerous, and I said I was not going to do it anymore, but it was a benefit to the plant, and he basically told me, no, you are going to do it. And I'm like, no, I'm not.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so I was like, I'm not going to do this dangerous thing anymore, and so I
Sure.
walked away. And so I'm not sure why he decided to be like that, but
That's unfortunate.
yeah, but I was at the point where I could go, I don't have to put up with this.
Yeah.
I can step off and do it. And I did have, my wife was, she had a good job to back it up. So for those who are trying to step off and do it on their own, it's not an easy way to make a living. And
No.
yeah, you know that.
Yes.
And the world is a lot different now too than it was even back then. I mean,
Right.
that was almost 20 years ago.
Sure.
It's a lot different now with the social media and stuff, and I'm way behind on all of that stuff. I don't manage to keep up.
That's totally fair.
Yeah.
I even myself struggle to keep up. But I think you did make some really good points. And I think a big part of that, in regards to having a real world job or a conventional job, are the benefits, the long-term benefits of potential, like building up a retirement, 401k or whatever kind of benefits there. There's the health insurance benefits. And I think, especially makers who are single guys, who don't necessarily have a whole lot of responsibilities going on, don't really think about that. They just, and I'm speaking from my own experience. I'm like, I'm
Hmm.
gonna live forever, and I don't need all that stuff. I'm super healthy and stuff until the first time you get hurt, and you're like,
Oh,
hmm, I have to
yeah.
think about this now because that
Or,
was really expensive.
yeah, come up with health issues you're not expecting. I mean, I've been there and it's like wind up needing a $250,000 surgery.
Right.
Yeah, but trying to raise a family, you know how it is. Raise a family and you have a mortgage and stuff, and
Yeah.
you know, are you at a point where you can afford all that if things well, and we're guys are making user knife EDCs, using knives and stuff, but depending on the market you pick, if you're trying to make the high end stuff, there's a lot fewer customers for that, and
Right.
that surely that is definitely where you're looking for people who have disposable income,
Right.
disposable money, and uh, yeah, those customers are hard to find, and
They are.
you got to be in the business a while, make a name for yourself before you can even get their
Yeah. So
attention, and that's
that's
hard.
Yeah, and that's what I was gonna say is it sounds like you did a good job over the years, building up reputation by going to shows, meeting people, shaking hands, kissing babies, all that, but also developing friendships. And I think that's another thing that uh, is somewhat unusual in the knife making business. And not everybody gets along, but I think other makers do help you in a way with selling work because they introduce people to you
Yes.
all the time. And I think I used to be kind of against shows, and that was probably like really honestly until like the last couple of years. I was like, it's hard to with social media, the boom of social media, and how like sales were going through social media. It's hard to justify the extra cost. But as the market and the knife making industry becomes flooded with more and more makers, the value of the show comes back to where you get to meet people in person, and you come from a time when that was the only way. There wasn't social
Yeah.
media. That was the only way. And so I was curious to get some insight from you about doing shows, because I think more and more over the next probably, well, already starting now, but over the next 5-10 years, shows are actually going to be just as valuable or more valuable than social media anymore because of that in-person opportunity.
Yeah.
And so if you have any insight from your time of doing shows that you can share that would help makers who've only done social media and like, all right, wait, how do I talk to people in real life? you
Well,
know
yeah. Of course, like we said here, when I first started, shows was all there was.
yeah,
But the collectors back then, it's like if you didn't show up at the Blade show, you weren't really in the business.
you're not a real
So
maker.
yeah, they expect you to show up, but they're wanting to spend a lot of money on your stuff, but they want to know they can get their money back out of it, at some point if they need to sell it, or
Sure.
especially the guys buying the high end art collector stuff. So they would look at you like an investment, and they would come to the shows, and they want to talk to you and find out, is this guy a jerk? Because nobody, who wants to buy a knife from somebody who's terrible personality,
Yeah,
So they want to
I just
talk to you.
right, and I'll just interrupt. I've iterated that a few times. I think here, but as well as elsewhere. But people 100% want to spend money with somebody they like. They don't want to give money to somebody they don't like.
Yeah, yeah. But if you're somebody that's not likable, then other people are probably not going to buy your work, so your stuff's not going to become collectible. So
Yeah.
this potential buyer is going to be apprehensive about buying from you.
Yeah.
So they would want to see, they would want to meet you, talk to you, but then some of them, they would bring little notepads around and
Mm.
they would look at your work and they take notes on your work,
Oh,
and then
interesting.
they would follow you like 2 or 3 years. Would come back, is this guy's work expanding? Is he doing better
Mm.
work? And then they go talk to other collectors and other knife makers. Go, what do you think about this guy? And so that was a whole different world. I suppose there's still some people like that out there, especially some of the older guys. But I
Yeah.
think we got into a point, and still partly in a place where a lot of the newer collectors, rather than spend $1,500 to $2,000 to go to a show, they're just as happy meeting you on social media
Sure.
and ordering one from you. And I'll put $2,000 into a Bowie knife instead of spending it on travel and motel rooms. So
Right.
I think we do have two different entities. But as far as knife shows, everybody should go to knife shows as much as you can.
Yeah.
Makers need to go and actually pick up other people's work and learn what a good knife looks like.
That's probably one of the greatest benefits. I mean, as well as meeting fellow makers
Yeah,
and developing those relationships and those potentially growing into something, in that person maybe referring you to someone else. But seeing, like you're saying, seeing work in person it's not this. I don't know. Yeah, pictures are worth 1,000 words. Maybe if it's a scenery or if it's a portrait or something, that. But when it comes to basically a product or piece of artwork that's a hands-on piece, you gotta see that in person.
yeah.
It is
Well,
not the same.
a photo's two-dimensional. It doesn't tell you anything about, thickness, the third dimension. How thick is a
Right.
handle? How thick is the knife, the blade material? Uh, what's the balance? How does it feel in your hand? And so you can't make a good knife if you don't know what a good knife looks like.
Yeah.
You couldn't
Well,
draw a picture of a tree if you didn't know what a tree looked like. So
yeah. Well, and you can get the dimensions all day, but until you hold something in your hand, it is a very different experience, especially
absolutely,
when it comes to balance points or weight distribution, um, and actual like edge geometry and stuff like that. Some
yes,
of that you can only feel. It's hard to hit it under the micrometer to really know. Again, you could map it out, but what that actually looks like and feels like, especially feels like, you can't
yes,
do if you're not in person.
critical. Yep,
So, so yeah, I think those are a lot of good takeaways for makers. But I think one of the greater values is definitely to polish up your interpersonal skills. You could be a great maker, but if you're not a great person or not a decent person, it doesn't matter. You're a great maker because nobody wants to buy your stuff from you.
yeah,
So, but yeah, I think developing relationships helps with developing reputation. Honestly, going to the shows, seeing work in person will also help develop the quality of your own work in person in general, um, as well as develop those relationships like we've developed, where you can reach out and lean on people if you have questions and or struggling at points. Having the
absolutely.
friendships are awesome. uh, I
Well,
feel very fortunate to be able to reach out to you or many other makers and be like, hey, I don't know what the hell's going on right now. What's the problem with this?
yeah. Well, you go to shows, and same with going to hammer ends. You got to go to the hammer ends and stuff, the
Absolutely.
knife maker get-togethers, and you learn things across the lunch table that you didn't even know you needed to know. Just
Sure.
in conversation. So communicating with other makers and the collectors, go find out what the collectors expect of you. Sit
Yeah.
down with a collector and go, what are you looking for?
That is a really great insight. I've never even thought. I
Yeah,
haven't even thought of asking what are you looking for as a collector? That's
yeah.
so smart. That makes so much sense, and I don't know why that's never crossed my mind.
I've
I'm
I've
just so
asked.
self-indulgent, I guess.
That's a good thing. at the hammer ends and stuff. We've had collectors come and go, do a seminar. Tell us what
Sure.
you're looking for when you're thinking about buying a knife.
Yeah.
What are you looking for? What do you want to see? What do you want to hear from the maker?
Right.
We should know. That's our customers. We need to
Yeah.
know what our customers are thinking, what they're looking
Absolutely.
for.
Well, and you just came back from a kind of a tour de force of, or a tour de forge, if you like, where
Yeah,
you did a couple, at least a couple different hammer-ins and presentations, or just over the last couple months, right?
yeah, yeah. Did Steve Coster's hammer in up in Idaho because Bruce Bump, Bruce and I have done a joint presentation on combination weapons before,
Hmm.
and Bruce was going to do the demo up there, and he sent me a message said, "Hey, come on up here and help me out with this demo." And so I did that, and then
Sure.
uh, did the Ohio Super Hammer in. Steve Rapp was to do a demo there, and he wound up with some issues and couldn't be there. But I
That was
knew,
the ABS hammer-in, right?
yeah, the big Super Hammer in that Butch Sheely put on there, and
Sure.
with the Ohio the Sofa Blacksmithing Group, and tremendous event. Boy, it was great. But I did the demo there on the Michael Price wrap frame handles and
Mm,
silver metal sheaths, and
we got some pictures of those. We don't have to
yeah,
look at them right now, but we could talk about them a little bit later.
sure.
But yeah,
And
that's
then
cool.
the Central States Hammer in down at Phil Evans' shop in Columbus, Kansas. So
Oh wow. So three.
just yeah,
That
yeah,
sounds exhausting.
yeah, yeah. Well, the Ohio one wasn't planning to go there, but our son lives in Myrtle Beach, him and
Okay.
his family. So we were calculating to go see the kids in Myrtle Beach anyway. And
I
Butch
gotcha.
called me and was like, okay. So went to Myrtle Beach and then swung up to Ohio and did the hammer in, and it was 2 weeks and 9 states and 3,000 miles and a lot of fun.
um, Bruce Bump's a good guy. I just met him. Ooh, let's see, a year ago actually at a show in Nashville, the Arts and Metal Show, and his work is awesome. But
Oh,
he's a
yeah.
really kind guy in general.
Oh,
Very
Bruce.
soft spoken, humble, um, but very talented.
Yeah. Bruce is incredible. I've known him for quite a number of years. And me and him and Jay Nielsen did a hammer in up in Canada, Jim Clow's shop. Uh, I don't know, some time ago.
Okay.
But, but
One
that's
million years ago. No.
yeah, that's when I got to really get to know Bruce and
Yeah.
Kay. Kay's his wife is she's a sweet lady.
Yeah.
But they're good people, and Bruce and I occasionally talk on the phone, or we have emailed each other while we're building projects and
Right.
commiserated over our challenges. And
Sure.
so
Because he does the cut and shoots as well.
yes,
And
yes,
is that what you guys were presenting at Steve's?
yes, that's yeah. We were doing a joint presentation there, and uh, Bruce likes me to present a little bit on how to build the lock work for the gun.
Oh,
So
sure.
so he feels like I explain it a little bit clearer, so that but kind of we just any excuse we have to get together. So
That's
and
good.
Co- Steve Coster was willing to fund it. So good time. But
Yeah.
that was a great hammer in. Now
I
Steve
bet.
did an awesome job. It was great all
Well, and
around.
I unfortunately I don't know when these things are happening. Steve is just he's in northern Idaho.
Yeah, yeah, up
Yeah.
by Ponderay, Lake
Lake
Ponderay.
Pondere. Okay. Is that
That's
Coeur
the one
d'Alene
that
area?
yeah, yeah, it's just north of that. That's where
Okay.
the Navy's got the sonar base in the lake. They
Oh,
submarines out in that big lake and do test sonars and
I didn't know that. That's
yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, there's actually a naval base in the lake. They got a little submarine and they test sonar systems in the lake.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I got a picture here of one of your cut and shoots. This is actually the one we used for the calendar.
Yeah.
And let's see if it comes up here. And if you can kind of describe it a little bit and walk us through what's going on with this particular piece.
Okay. Well, it is obviously a flintlock. Um, Pretty much everything about that weapon is it's all the metalwork is all Damascus. Even the lock, everything's Damascus. There's a the mainspring and the sear spring on the inside are not Damascus.
Okay.
Could have obviously made them of Damascus, but it's like, how much would a customer pay for you to make stuff that ain't seen, you know?
Sure. That's fair.
But essentially, all that's Damascus. It's a 50 caliber muzzleloader, and then that is my first spiral welded Damascus gun barrel.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So um, that is, as far as most of us know, that is the first truly spiral welded Damascus gun barrel that had been made since 1930. So
And where were they being made in 1930?
in Belgium,
In Belgium.
um,
Okay.
that's where the Damascus gun barrel manufacturing ended up almost entirely. It was virtually wiped out in World War One. Of course,
Okay.
when Germans invaded Belgium, they wanted to keep them from being able to make any kind of weaponry, so they destroyed the whole industry. There was a guy who started up making Damascus barrels again in the 1920s, Jean Delcourt DuPont, and he run the business for a number of years and basically went bankrupt. Gun
Sure.
manufacturers wouldn't buy the Damascus barrels anymore, and so they uh, they shut down in 1930. And I guess the little town they was in, they had a little celebration. This is the last Damascus gun barrel ever
Okay.
be made, and made the last barrel. And
Wow. Okay. And so you made this cut and shoot, this spiral welded
yeah,
Damascus barrel when?
it was like 10 years ago, 2013.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's such a great piece.
yeah,
And
I
I
got
oh, go ahead.
yeah 2013 Blade Show. I got the award for the best of the rest at the Blade Show for that
Right.
piece.
Just
But
I'm just looking at like the trigger area and also just and what is that called? Where that's kind of like the guard around the trigger.
well, it is, yeah, the trigger guard. It's
Oh, okay.
somewhat the
I,
the
I'm sorry, I don't know
that's
gun
okay.
nomenclature, so I'm just
The
like
the
I'm
the
super dumb right now. I don't know
the
what I'm looking
stock
at.
design is based off of there were a lot of European continental European pistols made
Okay.
uh, early 1800s, and that was basically the stock shape. These were made in Germany and Belgium and some
Mhm.
in France and stuff. So that was similar stock shape, and the trigger guard's based off of some of the patterns that I seen. I mean,
Okay. It's very
honestly,
cool. I really like just like the form, the curves, the lines, everything flows really nice. And I'm looking at least from this angle how it's attached. It's got like this upward post underneath the barrel. And I'm just like, I don't know how that's even attached. Is that silver soldered? Is this all from one solid piece and he sculpted everything with files? Like, I don't
yeah,
understand what's
yeah,
going on here.
that's one solid piece.
Oh my
Yeah,
God.
yeah, that's
I'm
one.
laughing because I don't even know where I would start. I don't know how long. Like this would take me hours and hours
Yeah,
and hours
that's
to.
that was one solid piece, and I bandsawed it. It was a rectangular bar Damascus, ladder pattern
Uh-huh.
Damascus. I
Okay.
bandsawed it down the center, stood it up on narrow edge,
Yeah.
bandsawed it down the center, kind of like 2/3 to one side, 1/3 to the other,
Okay.
and then unfolded it. So the strip you see going down the buttstock was the
Yep.
thinner side of it unfolded, and
Oh.
then shaped
Oh.
it all out. The thicker part forged it up and
Oh
bent
my.
it around, and then hand filed and shaped it up.
Oh my gosh, that is so ridiculous. I can't even imagine. It's so cool though that you like. I'd be curious what your kind of like your preparation and planning processes. I mean, are these just because you've talked about how you have kind of a mechanical mind and you used to take things apart, you used to build engines when you were 12 years old, like you have this mechanical mind. Are you
Yeah.
seeing these things in 3D and then kind of you have an idea of, because for me, like when it comes to my patterns, I see what it looks like at the end, but then I have to think about all the steps and processes that I have to go through to get to that point. And I'm doing it all in my head. And I'm
Yeah.
curious if that's what's happening for you as well,
Yeah.
or if it's, yeah.
Yeah, it is. I mean, at
Okay.
least like the things like the trigger guard. Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, that's in my head. I'll draw a sketch that give me
sure.
some dimensions so I can calculate size of the bar and all that, and work it out where I need to make the bends and such. That's all in my head.
Wow.
Now, the flintlock mechanism.
I'm going to
I,
pull the picture back up because this is a closer look at the flintlock.
yeah, there should be. I thought I had on my website a picture of the inside of the lock.
Okay. I'll go look for that while you're talking.
There's the inside of it and the percussion lock on the pistol I built for the NRA. But the lock work, I have a software app on my computer. It's Corel Draw.
Okay.
It's actually a commercial artist software. Um, it can save things in like CAD programs and stuff, but it's only 2-dimensional. But I got it. It was on a computer that I bought years ago, and I've bought upgrades to it. It's really pretty expensive stuff now if you go to
Sure.
buy it outright.
Yeah.
But I use it a lot, and I'm really good and fast with it.
Okay.
But like the lock work was totally designed on in Corel Draw, and really all my knives that I make now, I design it in Corel Draw
Oh,
and
wow.
then print
Yeah.
it off, and it's like I can make patterns and print it off on paper and go glue the paper on a piece of steel and grind and cut it to the edge of the paper to the lines in the pattern.
Yeah.
So that's my methodology, but the lock work was all completely done on Corel Draw, and then took the plans out to the shop and built it.
Right.
But
That's so cool.
yeah.
It's so intense. Like, even how long does a project like that take?
That one took me 6 months to build
I believe it.
in its entirety. But the figuring out how to make the Damascus gun barrel, I spent about 2.5 years messing around with that and
Sure. And
building tools
you have videos on your website of you actually going through that process.
of me making it. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a video of me welding up the Damascus for that first gun barrel on that cut and shoe.
Yeah.
And then I've got a video. I built a Damascus pistol, not a combination weapon, but just a percussion muzzleloader
Oh,
pistol.
right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Doug Ritter asked me to do that for gun rights, and then it was donated to the NRA for their Institute for Legislative Action auction.
Sure.
And so I've got a video of me building that. There's a story behind that. There's a Dodge City, Kansas.
Uh-huh.
There's a museum out there, the Boot Hill Museum.
Okay.
So not long after I'd built that pistol and had pictures of it on the internet, the
Yeah.
curator of the museum sent me an email, and she goes, "Wow, we've got some Damascus barrel shotguns in the museum here. I was trying to find something out about them, and I found you." And she goes, "That's incredible that you're a Kansan and you've made this pistol." And she goes, "Can you make us a video that we can run on a loop that explains our Damascus shotguns,
Oh,
but
wow.
also shows your work since you're from Kansas?" So I spent all this time making a video, and I sent it to her, and she goes, "Oh, that's incredible." And I never heard from her again. I don't think that video.
Perfect.
I think she left the museum. I'm betting the people out there at Boot Hill Museum don't have any idea I made that for them, but it's up there.
I'm going to
So,
share the page real quick so you can see here. This is the top of the page.
yeah,
So from the home page, which is culverart.com, you go to I found that page through the gallery. Slide down
yeah,
to the bottom, gun barrels, and it kind of talks about it, a little bit of the history like we've talked about here. It shows this one spiral in the cut and shoot we've been showing. And then you have the one that's just the pistol here.
yeah,
And then just below that, there's a couple videos
yeah. That's the two
of,
videos.
Yeah, and so this other one probably goes into the Damascus steel pistol build, goes
Yes.
probably a little bit deeper into the construction and the assembly of the lock mechanism and all
Yes.
that.
Yeah, it
Right,
goes through building the whole pistol, showing me building the whole thing.
right,
I think YouTube, I used to have comments and stuff on them videos constantly.
sure.
In about a year, I haven't had anybody comment for a year now. I'm like, you
Oh,
know,
probably because it's firearms and stuff.
yeah, I think YouTube has put a
I,
damper on it because nobody's made any comments. I haven't paid attention to the number of likes, but
sure,
nobody's commented for a long time.
sure. It's I'm curious about the whole history behind cut and shoots and where those start. Who start? I mean, I think what is it? Of course, there's like bayonets on rifles that go way back, but the kind of cut and shoots that, like what you and Bruce and other makers are starting to do more of.
Okay.
Where does that come from?
Okay, if you want some written documentation on that,
Okay,
Blade's third guide to making knives, that was published, I don't know, maybe
okay,
5 years ago, 4 years
okay,
ago. They asked me to do an article or a chapter on
sure,
combination weapons. So there's a whole big chapter that I wrote in there,
okay,
and I included Bruce and Ron Newton and Javier Vaught and
right.
a
So if
bunch
people
of
want to
folks.
go super deep, that's where you want to go.
Yeah, go get into that. But combination weapons, literally almost from the creation of firearms, people started combining the two. There in some museum, I don't remember where it is, but there's a sword blade with a matchlock gun barrel on the side of it. It's like, you know,
Oh wow,
like immediately somebody started putting them together.
for sure.
So yeah, so there's all kinds of various iterations of them. In my observations, I have never seen a single combination weapon that made any sense at all. There's like nobody who got in either a gunfight or a knife fight felt themselves well armed with a combination weapon. It's like,
Okay.
it's like a pistol stock makes a lousy knife handle, and a knife handle makes a lousy pistol stock, and they're just awkward. I really, they became people who could do it is like, look what I can do.
I
It,
see.
it's a showpiece. Look what I can
A
do.
flex.
Somebody's
I think
like, look
people
what,
call that a flex nowadays. They're like, check it out.
yeah, yeah. Look, they just do it to show off,
I
It's like,
gotcha.
look, and then the people that buy them, they go, oh, look at this cool thing, and totally impractical. I
I
mean,
see. So it sounds like you might chalk them up to more. They're like a fantasy piece in a way, but they function.
yeah,
But they're not maybe necessarily. You'd probably still be better off with like a dedicated pistol and a dedicated knife
yeah. I mean,
in your holster on either side of you.
and there were factories that got involved in it. There was a company named Unwin and Rogers, and there were others that kind of copied Unwin and Rogers that were making pocket knives that had little pistol barrels. That at first it was percussion barrels, and then they wound up when we got into rimfire guns, they had little tip up barrels that would tip up so you could drop a rimfire cartridge in them, and so they
I
were.
feel like I've seen because they're like in line with the handle, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I've
Wade
seen that.
Culver, at least Wade.
Okay.
It seems like there's more than Wade that built them, but Wade Colder built a combination weapon, a replica of a Unwin and Rogers, and
Okay.
but you can find all kinds of. There's thousands of them out there. They're almost not even worth anything because there's so many. You got
I
to
got you.
find one that's really pristine. But uh, Ron Newton has made at least a couple of those, and but yeah, factories got into building the things. It was really all the rage for a long time. It was really
Yeah.
almost World War II before all the factories and stuff quit making them, and then
Right.
it was Bruce and Ron Newton and a few others that got into making them again. And for me, being everybody knew I'm a knife maker and a gunsmith, so it'd be weird if I didn't make one, And,
I see.
and so I was like,
Or what are you doing? Why aren't you on the trend? Come on. Like what's going
well,
on?
yeah. But I was like, after all the cool stuff that Bruce had made and Ron Newton, I was like, what am I? what am I going to build? It's like
I got you.
nobody
Yeah, sure.
even notice what I do if I don't do something wild.
Yeah,
And it's like that's why where I come up with the idea of the Damascus gun barrels, and I'm like, well, nobody's doing this, I'll do that, And
yeah.
I was like, why doesn't anybody do this anymore? And I'm like, oh, there's why.
Because it's a
It's
lot of
hard to
work.
do.
It's hard to do, and
Yeah,
I imagine it's well. Okay, so kind of to take a step back, you said that your spiral welded um, barrel was probably one of the first successfully manufactured and is usable since the 1930s.
yeah.
And how was that testing that up for the first time? Was that a little scary?
Well, uh, in a way, yes. Uh, I gave it away to a buddy of mine, but I had a bullet trap that I used to test fire guns in
Okay.
when I was doing gunsmithing, and I had built the thing, but I had a way of mounting the barrel on the front of it, and
Okay.
I literally built a piece was like a well, it was 1 inch round bar stock, and I
Hmm.
threaded to screw in the back of the barrel where a breech plug would go.
Okay.
But then it was drilled so I could put a piece of cannon fuse in it, and so literally clamped it on the the bullet trap thing, and lit the cannon fuse and went around the other side of the shop and wait for the explosion. And I set a video camera up,
Right.
so I could video the thing, but gradually put more and more powder in it until honestly reached the point that I just couldn't burn any more powder in it. But
Okay.
yeah,
I
but
see. So you were destructive testing it.
oh yeah,
You were trying to
yeah,
see what it would take. And what
yeah.
so but it never came apart.
No, and also when you're doing testing like that is, I would fire it and then I would go around and use a micrometer and check it. You might
Oh,
make sure
sure.
the barrel didn't swell up. If it
Right.
started to swell, then you hit the limit, and
Yeah.
it never moved, so it was
And
all
when
good.
yeah, and when you're making would you still use high carbon steel, or are you using a kind of a lower carbon, tougher steel to as a combination for making the gun barrels?
Well, here's the thing.
Okay, let's
I
hear it.
mean, the first barrel on the combination weapon,
Yeah.
that was 1084 and 15 and 20.
Okay.
The pistol I built for the NRA was 1084 and 1018.
Okay.
Yeah, that one.
This one right here. Okay.
When I started working on that one, I was talking to Ray Rybar and 1084 and 1018, and Ray goes, "You're never going to get that to etch so it can show a pattern." And he was just about right.
Oh,
oh,
really?
oh man, yeah, I had a hard time getting that to etch, but that's another little story.
Because the only difference is really the carbon content?
Yeah, carbon content, a little bit on the alloys. I put it
Okay.
in for well, I had done some test etching.
Okay.
Well, if you notice in that photograph, if you look at the lock plate,
Yes.
the lock plate's also made up of the same Damascus.
I got you.
So, and the trigger guard as well.
Yeah. Trigger
Anyway,
guard looks awesome.
I had done a little test etch on some of the a sample I made up, and I'm like, yeah, it's etching.
Okay.
But I didn't really check it for depth,
Oh,
didn't
okay.
really do that. So I put it when I got the barrel finished, I put it in ferric chloride and it etched it for a few minutes. It was like it stopped. It wouldn't do anything else. And I'm like, it's
Mhm.
not deep enough yet.
Right.
And I was like, now what am I going to do? So then I went and put it in some hydrochloric acid. Well,
Okay.
it etched for a little while, then it quit working.
Oh,
So
interesting.
so then I went back to the ferric chloride, and it's like 15 cycles back and forth. It would work in one for a while, then quit, and then something
That
about
is
the
bizarre.
yeah.
Just not enough
Eventually,
of a difference between the materials, maybe, I guess.
yeah,
I mean, you
I
obviously got some contrast out of it,
I got
but
it there. Yeah,
you
I
can't
wound up then. I got enough depth in it. And I didn't get the whatever the muck is that we call oxides, which I don't think they're really oxides. Whatever we create with ferric chloride etching,
yeah,
I couldn't get enough of that on it to show the pattern, so I did use a cold gun blue on it to get, but I had to have some depth in the pattern, and
I
but
got you.
going back and forth between the two etchant solutions, I got it.
I see.
But it,
So you finally got topography, then you went to the gun blue, and then you pulled strokes to
yes,
brighten up the
yeah.
highs.
But
Gotcha.
here's what I learned about making Damascus gun barrels. I
Okay.
used the high carbon steels, and it's really hard to get those to weld. Uh,
Oh, really?
well, you know, when we make knife blades out of it, we're stacking up a
Yep.
stack of it and doing severe dimensional reduction on, you know, we're compressing it down,
Oh, right.
restacking,
So you're not going.
a lot
Yeah.
of heat, a lot of dimensional reduction, a lot of pressure and stuff. You wrap
Hmm.
Damascus up into a spiral that looks like a compressed coil spring for a gun barrel. You can't
Yeah.
do that kind of dimensional reduction. You can only tap on it a few times.
Right.
And the other thing is you can't ever let it cool off. If it cools off in an area that it's not welded yet, it'll form forge scale in there and you'll never
Yeah.
get it cleaned out. So
Wow.
part of my videos, you'll see I built this little tiny forge. It's like a little chimney, and I'm actually welding those spiral turns inside that little forge. It never comes out of that forge until I've gone down the length of the whole barrel.
I remember watching that. Actually, even before I met you,
Yeah,
I watched that and I was like, "Whoa, what a cool." I mean, I thought it was a genius solution, honestly. And I was actually looking at them again last night and I was watching the video with my wife a little bit, trying to, as I was going through and picking up other pictures to put on to pull in.
yeah.
I was like, man, what a smart setup. It's a great solution. I feel like I mean, I'm sure it was a lot of work to put everything together, but it was elegant, honestly, very smart. Once everything's put
Yeah.
together, super smart and worked really great. It looks
There
like,
there's something else that's not in either of the videos. It's not like I'm
okay,
trying to keep it as a secret, but just time constraints. You know,
sure.
when you bend metal around something, it
Hmm.
stretches. It's like
Yes.
it forms kind of a pivot point in the middle of the bar. Everything
Hmm.
underneath the pivot point is compressed and gets wider. Everything above the
Right.
pivot point gets narrower. It gets stretched.
Oh, interesting. So becomes
Yeah,
somewhat
it's
trapezoidal.
like a truncated cone type shape that, you know,
Yeah.
it's got angled
Yeah.
like so. So
Yeah.
when I'm wrapping Damascus around a 5/8 inch diameter mandrel, and
Hmm.
wrapping around a mandrel that tight, I had all this distortion. And so once I got
Sure.
it wound together, the narrow tops on them, I've got all these big gaps between the turns, and I
Right.
could never get those closed up. It was like virtually impossible. And I can't tell you how
Oh
much
no.
Damascus I wrecked trying to. It's like, I said,
Oh, well, I mean, you said you worked on it for like 2.5
yeah.
years.
Well,
Oh my
finally, I was
gosh.
like,
To get the technique
well, I was
down.
like, I got to do something to change this. And I thought, well, so I was welding this Damascus up, two twisted rods welded together, and then formed that
Yeah.
up. I was doing a 1/2 inch thick by 5/8 wide, is what I wanted the material to be wound to be. But then it would
Yep.
do this weird stretching thing. So
Hmm.
I wound up making a set of dies for my hydraulic press, and I
Okay.
actually was welding the ribbon stock up, the stuff I was going to wind, and I'm pressing it to the opposite shape
Oh,
so
interesting.
it's narrow on the bottom.
Anticipating
Yeah,
yeah.
and so I would wind it with a narrow edge on the bottom, which would compress and get wider, and the top would narrow, and it would pull up straight, and I would have perfectly straight sides when I got done winding it on the mandrel.
Right. Wow.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, and part of something I've been thinking about lately is like, in regards to how barrels were welded. And obviously, there's a
Yes.
video I think you linked to through your website to a website called Damascus
Yes.
Knowledge. And they have a video on there showing, or actually, oh gosh, is it on that
I
website that has
I do.
the guys forging the?
That's Dr. Drew House that owns Damascus
Okay,
Knowledge. It is like
yeah,
the only place where you can find information on Damascus gun barrels. But I
yeah,
don't last I knew, Drew did not have that video linked there. It's on
okay,
YouTube. If you, I don't know if you look for Damascus gun barrels on YouTube, if it'll come up or not. That's actually a
yeah,
pirated copy of the original.
okay,
You and I talked about that. That's a whole nother long story. But
Yeah.
But the thing that I learned, and part of this was researching through Dr. Drew. He's a good friend of mine now. Through all our research together, those old gun barrels were made of a combination of wrought iron and very, very low carbon steel. It was almost pure iron.
Oh, wow.
They
Okay.
never used flux. Those it was,
Okay.
but see, the modern steels that we use have got all the alloys in them, and I think the alloys slow down the process, the metallic bonding process that is what we create in forge welding. And
Mhm.
then the wrought iron and low carbon steel mix or low alloy mix is really soft. And if you go to my YouTube channel, there's a couple of videos on there of me
Okay.
reforging an old gun barrel blank.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Um, if you look around the museums, you will see a lot of old pistols made mid 1800s in Europe, dueling pistols, target pistols, and they have Damascus gun barrels.
Mhm.
There's very little documentation left about any of that process work was done back then, but what little we have mostly talks about making shotgun barrels.
Okay.
So there's a gun collectors forum called doublegunshop.com. You can get on the forum. It's kind of like Blade Forum for antique gun collectors. There's like a
Okay.
thousand people on there anytime, night or day, you know.
Oh,
But I
wow.
used to be on there a lot, and guys asked me, where did all the pistol barrels come from? And my theory is that there had to be a number of the shotgun barrel tubes that they welded up that had a flaw in them. Couldn't
Sure.
make a shotgun tube, but you could resell them and use the materials. And I was like, okay, go back to my process and tell you
Right.
I was winding Damascus on a 5/8 inch diameter mandrel, but I'm making 45 and 50 caliber barrels. And
Sure.
you've got to drill out to get all that's an ugly hole you wind up with. You got to drill a lot of material out. So
Yeah.
I'm welding the spiral up and then
Okay.
forging the outside of the tube until I drive it down to only about an 1/8 inch diameter hole in the middle down to
Okay.
bore and then drilling it out.
Okay.
So I'm going pistol barrels. They're taking shotgun tubes, taking a chunk of that and forging it down to smaller diameter for a pistol bore type size.
Yeah.
So there's a gentleman in England. His name's Peter Dyson. He's got a website, peterdyson.com. You can get on there. He has run all over Europe and gathered up unfinished Damascus barrel tubes, and you can order them from his website. And he sells them just full length tubes, short pieces, and stuff. Anyway, I got to know Peter, and I run into him at a knife show, gun show thing out in Las Vegas some years back. And
Mhm.
I was talking to him about his barrels tubes there. He goes, "Yeah, guys keep wanting to make pistols out of these things, but the bores are too big." And I said, "Well, here's what you got to do. You just forge them down smaller in diameter." And so he picked up a foot long piece of barrel tube forging. He handed it to me. He goes, "So go make me a pistol barrel." So,
Oh.
so I took it home and I
Yeah.
forged it up and I videoed the whole thing. There's a 1 hour long, absolutely everything I did, along with some commentary, and a shorter
Right.
one that's like 36 minutes. But I videoed the whole thing. And my point was because I knew I got it done, I sent it back to Peter, and he was like, "Oh, I'm going to ship you a whole case of barrel tubes to reforge." I'm like, "No,
Yeah,
yeah,
I'm
yeah."
good.
So I said, I put up the video on YouTube. Go find. I said, any good blacksmith can do what I did. Go find a good blacksmith over in England, have them watch the video, and they can do this for you. So
I see it here,
that's the
yeah.
reason that's
It's
up
a
there.
it's a it's a technique that blacksmiths use for reducing pipe or
Yeah,
tubing, right?
yeah,
Usually it's a V block on the bottom,
yeah.
and then they're just gently.
Simple blacksmithing. So I
Yeah.
created all that for Peter, but you can watch the videos. But here's what I learned: that
Okay.
combination of wrought iron and low alloy steel, it was frighteningly soft. It was like forging bubble gum. Oh my goodness.
Okay.
And I even broke one of the original spiral welds. It broke during the forging process, and I threw a little bit of anhydrous borax on it and a few taps, and I mean it just welded back up. That
Oh,
would have been
wow.
fatal on my modern steels. I'd have never got
Carbon
that to
steel.
weld back up. So
Sure.
it was like those guys had the ultimate dream material for making Damascus gun barrels.
Right.
We don't have wrought iron now. I've got a bunch of wagon
Sure.
tires and stuff, but
I got one of those
yeah, but
too.
it's like dubious quality. What is this stuff? I was like, and there is a book that W. Greener from Greener Shotgun Company, he wrote about 1880. It's called The Modern Gun and Its Manufacture.
Okay.
He's got a little information in there on making Damascus barrels, but he talks about how much they struggled to find wrought iron and the steel components that would work together and etch out properly. Is like there was a certain specification of these materials, and if they didn't get what they needed, they couldn't get to Damascus to work. So it's kind of frightening. You know how much work
Sure.
it is now messing with the patterns. The idea of spending all
Right.
that time with the wagon tire material and praying that you come up with some kind of pattern at the end of all the hours. And so
Right.
so it's like I do want to try it some more, but no guarantees if it'll work.
Yeah. So I'm going to share a frame. I did pull up, I found the video. And this used to be available through that website that you have linked on your website, but the domain is out of date. It doesn't work anymore. But this page or this video was linked on that page, I believe, and it's called Cannons Damas La
Yeah, that's
Fabrication.
French.
Fabrication, because in Belgium they speak French. But anyways, it's a great video. It's 25 minutes long. It's really old. It's got it's like classic silent film
Yes.
with the all of the. Let's see. I'm gonna pull the volume down, but we'll play this just a little. Um, I don't know. Can you? I guess I turned the volume. It doesn't matter. You don't need to listen to it because it's just music in the credits. But it goes through the whole like um
Yeah.
they're in this village in Belgium where they show the process. It's interesting. The blacksmiths sometimes are looking at the camera like, what is this devil
Yeah. It,
our secrets? um it's pretty interesting.
if if you
But
go through that, one of the things the gun barrel blacksmiths, the guys that welded these up, they did not make the Damascus. All that was made in big
okay,
foundries and rolling mills and stuff. And then a
yeah,
merchant brought the rods around. There were 3/8 inch square rods, about 4 feet long, and you see some in this video. These
sure,
guys would come to the villages where the forges were. Barrel welding was a cottage industry, and
yeah,
the blacksmiths would buy the different pattern rods and then would make them into barrels, and then a different guy would come around and buy the welded tubes at the
okay,
villages, and he would sell them to the gun manufacturers. So
mm,
this video was made by a museum in 1928. It was actually a series of documentaries about the lifestyle of there's the rods right there.
oh yeah,
It was a
yeah, they look like they're maybe 4 feet long, like you're
Yeah,
saying. Yeah,
they this museum did a bunch of videos about lifestyle in this section of Belgium, and you know doing laundry, all the different crafts and stuff, and barrel welding was one of them that they did. I think the barrel that was in 1928, and this is John Dupont Delcour's workshops, the guy that made the last barrel in 1930. It was his
mm-hmm.
workshops or his crews.
Oh wow,
So
okay,
anyway, uh, that museum evidently went defunct. The videos went to the Curtius Museum, which is in Liège, Belgium. A
Okay.
fellow by the name of Pete Miklajunas, he's American, lived by around Chicago, went to the Curtius Museum and bought the rights to distribute this video. And he made CDs, and he used to have a website that was damascusbarrels.com. And he sold the videos there. I have a copy of it. He sold it in
Mhm.
CDs. Of course, right away, people started pirating them and putting them on YouTube. And
Hence what we're watching
yeah,
right
which is
now.
what we're watching. And Pete bought it for a while, but Pete's health was failing. Pete passed away a couple years ago,
Right.
but I knew Pete quite well and talked to him. And he said, I don't have long in this world, and all I've got's my CDs, and it's just as well that it's out there on YouTube for the world to have. And so he knew about the pirating. He was good at in the end that it's out there for the world to share. And so that's the
Sure.
story of the video. But
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great video. It's very interesting to watch and to see the techniques. Right now, they are welding, I think, 3 or 4 bars
yeah,
together,
if you,
and they're just tapping them. It's a lead blacksmith, probably the master, and then
mhm.
his apprentice. And they're just kind of tapping them together, kind of massaging the material. They're working out of a coal forge. They're even using tongs to help kind of squeeze and align things.
Yeah, if you watch the video, of course, whoever did the video and edited the little segments and put it together, if you're watching and paying attention, they're out of sequence. Or and
Oh,
Pete and
sure.
I talked about at one point, maybe I should go through and re-edit it and put it all in proper
Re-editing them.
sequence. And we never got around to that. One thing
Yeah.
that's interesting, you'll see in a segment here, it might be coming up. The head blacksmith, he pulls the barrel tube out of the forge and he blows through it, and you'll see a slug of something fly out on the ground.
Okay.
And there's another little clip later on where he's putting the tube back in the forge, and there's little bullet shaped things sitting on the edge of the forge, and he slams the barrel tube down over it. Those are clay plugs for the purpose of
Mm,
keeping the heat and the fire from blowing up the bore of the tube and eroding the bore from the heat.
I
But
see.
you'll see that show up in there. So, but that was a little thing that I caught in there that nobody had noticed. But they plug in the tube at some point, and
Yeah. Well, and also at some point they have the mandrel that they're wrapping around, but they also have a thin, maybe tin foil that's wrapped around it too to keep the material, I think, from welding to the mandrel.
well, okay,
Okay.
that is called a chemise, which is the French
Okay.
word for sleeve. Um,
Sleeve. Okay.
the Belgians, and that's part of the video I did for Peter Dyson.
Hmm.
The chemise, it will not. It has nothing to do with welding. Uh,
Okay.
you're throwing a mandrel inside the tube. Well,
Yeah.
the mandrel is room temperature, and as soon as you put a mandrel inside the tube, it starts sucking heat out of the inside of the tube, and
I see.
everything
Okay.
drops below forge welding temperature in a matter of 2 or 3 seconds. So it won't
Right.
weld, and a lot of people speculated that and come up with that idea. Here's my theory.
Okay. Let's
You
hear it.
you see the Belgians welding wrapping that material up, and they actually do it in 2 sections. There's 2 different pieces of what they call it ribbon that they wind,
Yeah.
and there's a scarf weld in the center of that tube. But the tube is so long and it's weighty, and I think they're using the chemise to add structural support to it while they're handling it. It's just to strengthen the thing up so during all the
I see.
handling it doesn't fold up on itself.
I see.
Um, that was the process that yeah, you'll see that it's coming up here pretty soon where they do the winding. In Greener's book, he talks about the Belgians used a chemise. The British did not. Greener company made barrels for a while too. They would weld it up in like 12 foot, 14-inch long sections, and then they would jump weld like 3 sections together after they had these shorter sections welded up. But Greener,
Okay.
that's where they're putting on the chemise right there. It says
Hmm.
10. Michelajunas put all the captions in. I don't know why he chose the word 10, but we discussed that's not what it was. It was iron.
Oh,
Yeah, it
okay.
was iron. Anyway, Greener talks about that, and I would have loved. I want to take a Greener barrel and cut it apart and find those welds where they jump welded the sections together and look at that weld. I'm
Okay.
like, how did they do that? Was it a flat jump weld? Was there some kind of taper and cone to it? I don't
Sure.
know, but I'm curious about that. But anyway, I think that's why the Belgians did it because they welded. They were putting together a 4 foot long tube, and yeah, here's the wrapping part where they wrap it around
It's
the
such a
mandrel.
good, yeah, it's such a good approach.
Yeah.
First time I saw this, I was like, oh, duh.
Well,
This makes so much
and you'll see
sense.
during the welding process, the master smith has got a gauge thing that he feels the
Right.
outside of the tube. What he's
Yep.
doing there, they're doing the same thing I had to do. They're wrapping it on a mandrel big enough to get the job done, but eventually they got
Yep.
to forge that tube smaller in diameter so they can drill it out and finish it out. He's measuring the outside of the tube, knowing how thick his ribbon is so he can gauge the bore diameter on the inside.
Right.
So yeah, and this is where they're well, they're continuing the wrapping, and then pretty soon here you'll see them make the scarf weld on it. But it's
Yeah.
pretty fascinating.
It's
The
it's super fascinating to watch.
the helper guy cracks me up watching him. He's smoking his pipe the whole time. He's
Oh yeah. He's I watched, so I was just down working with Steve Schwarzer, and the Smith just came out of the shop with the fully wrapped.
yeah.
But I think there's still more consolidation
Oh
work that at this point that needs to be
yeah.
done. But anyways, Steve had never seen this video before, and he just thought it was
Yeah.
fascinating and cool to see
Schwarzer.
such an old video.
Yeah. And I don't know what the dude
So
on
now
the
he's got
left
the
there is
gate.
doing. He's got the gauge for figuring the outside of
Yeah,
the diameter of it, but yeah,
that's yeah.
there's a few people that wrote stuff on Damascus barrels, and even Greener wrote some in that book. Um,
Hmm.
these guys were not blacksmiths, and a lot of what they wrote was pure crap.
Oh, okay. Good
And
to
even
know.
Greener, Greener kind of talks crap on the Belgian barrels during the work, but even by 1903, Greener quit making his own barrels and just bought Damascus barrels from Belgium. So
Sure.
there's where they see that
Well,
right there where the guy kind of stabbed it on the. That's where he was
yep.
putting the plug in it.
I got you.
But
And something you mentioned earlier, that I thought was really interesting, is that but before World War, I think you said World War One, these barrels were in fashion. They were being
yes,
produced like crazy, and then the villages where this work was being done was destroyed. This one guy afterward, was that
uh,
Greener, you were saying?
DuPont.
Was
Jean,
DuPont, sorry.
Jean,
Started making gun barrels again, but it didn't sound like people were interested in getting them. What happened? Like, what did they just go out of fashion, or was there some sort of negative kind of marketing around them, saying that like that they weren't actually very strong,
yes.
or yeah, what happened there?
Um, Up until about World War One, really, the reason for the Damascus barrels was for shotgun tubes.
Okay,
There really wasn't such a thing as wing shooting birds up until the early 1800s. And then people got the idea of loading like shot into guns and trying to shoot a bird on the fly. Well, the barrels
okay,
back then were made out of wrought iron and they were really heavy, and the guns sucked for that. They needed a
sure,
gun that would swing nicely, which meant they needed
I
thin
gotcha.
barrel tubes.
Okay,
And the old wrought iron could not support the explosion if you made it thin. And steel back
mm,
then, they didn't have a good process for making steel. They could make steel and they could pour it, but if they pour it into an ingot, as it cooled it, it would actually like self-destruct. It would crack on the inside. So they couldn't make good steel.
Interesting.
And
So the were under a lot of stress as they were
yeah,
cooling.
yeah, it would crack on the inside. You know how everything shrinks as it cools down,
Right.
and the steel back then would just crack on the inside. It wasn't until
Hmm.
it was actually, I think it was Krupp that come up with it first in Germany. That if you see some old gun barrels that say fluid steel on them, they
Okay.
come up with a process of somehow using hydraulic compression on the ingots as they were cooling to compress them and keep them from wrecking themselves. But it was an
Right.
extremely expensive process. But anyway, what they found out is they can make thin barrel tubes out of this pattern welded Damascus stuff and
Okay.
and make proper shotguns out of them. And that was the whole point of making these barrel tubes out of
Yeah.
Damascus was for shotguns, for guns that were light, thin tubes, so they swing nicely for wing shooting birds. So
Okay.
the they wound up with there's a few Damascus barreled rifles out there, the Damascus pistols that were made continental Europe, uh, and again, I'm saying all those was made from these tubes that had something wrong with them, or you know what I
Sure.
mean?
I mean, it makes
Yeah,
sense. Most of the material's there already. It's just
yeah,
after 6 or 8 inches, there's a
yeah,
flaw. What do you
yeah.
do?
There's
Do you trash it or do you make something
yeah,
smaller? It's just like a lot of makers now are like knife makers don't make mistakes, they just make smaller
yeah,
knives.
yeah, kind of the same thing. And you can see how intense that work is. There you see where the guy was blowing the plug out of the end of it. But
Yeah.
anyway, um, but there wasn't all when Germany invaded Belgium in World War One. They wanted to put them out of business, making weapons. So they destroyed everything, and they
Yeah.
burned all the foundries, and they burned the paperwork got burned up, and so there's
Mm.
no documentation out of Belgium. There you see the guy blowing the plug out of it. But anyway, so all we got really is the stuff that Greener wrote, and anything else that was written was pretty much guys rewriting what Greener wrote. But Greener wasn't a blacksmith. I mean, he knew a part of his process, and truth in advertising wasn't such a big thing back then either. So,
Sure.
so some of what Greener wrote was a little braggadocious and probably not even true, So yeah, kind of
Yeah.
take it with a grain of salt. So I'm really, I mean, there were a few guys that messed around with Damascus gun barrels uh,
Yeah.
and did some stuff. Chuck Patrick did a little bit of work with it, and Bill
Okay.
Fiorini did back in the day. Fiorini was taking a wrapping Damascus around a solid rod
Okay.
and turning out something like a gun barrel. That's really hard to do because you wrap it around a solid rod and then bring it up to welding heat. Your wrap material welds to the rod first in the forge.
Yeah.
Well, then you can't easily move it to close up the gaps between the turns of the wrap material. So
Mm. Right.
um, Heinz Denig, a blacksmith in Germany, did the same thing, and they managed to come up with some gun barrels. But you cannot recreate the old patterns by doing that. It's got to be
I
laid
see.
up. The wrap's got to be laid up side by side, just like they do in here in this video, or you
Yeah.
can't accurately recreate what they did. So
Right.
my whole point was to accurately recreate what they're doing, and like I got to do it just like they did. So that's why I work so hard at it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it is really interesting to watch this and also to kind of have your color commentary at the same time and telling the history and the stories of it. Um, there's that assistant smoking his giant
Yeah,
pipe.
yeah,
It's so funny. And it's cool. I mean, the way they're doing it here does seem to be honestly the most effective way. They start out by roughly wrapping it around a mandrel, and then they proceed to then weld all that material
yeah,
together. But it is a very, very labor intensive
very.
process. And I'm sure there's all kinds of like you got to be watching your temps and like you said, putting that clay at the end to help keep it from getting burned up down
Yeah,
there. Um, Yeah, it's really interesting. Anyways, I think this video's. Oh, I think the next step is for them to etch it and
Yeah.
grind it. Well, and that's the other thing to take into consideration is like after you wrap it and you do all the forge welding, you're watching, engaging, because then you still have to grind and cut into
Yes.
it, right?
Yeah. You know,
To reveal the pattern
yeah, that's one of the things
at the
that,
core.
I spent a lot of time on double gun shop forums explaining how these were made to the guys who collect them and own them. Oh, well, you mentioned why did they quit buying them? So the industry was
Oh
wiped
yeah, yeah,
out
yeah.
in World War One. Delcourt
Hmm.
DuPont set up the shops and tried to make them again later, but by the 1920s, now they figured out how to. Well, they had World War One, and
Yeah,
the countries that were in the war threw money into let's figure out how to make steel gun barrels. Well, by this time, they're making machine guns, and they got to have good steel
I see.
barrels. And so we had a
Right.
world war. So anyway, everybody figured out how to make steel gun barrels, and the gun manufacturers now could make their own steel barrels and did not have to buy Belgian barrels. And so, and then Delcourt DuPont could not supply all the Damascus barrels necessary for all the.
For sure.
So anybody, so he couldn't supply them. But two, the gun manufacturers still had customers who wanted the pretty Damascus barrels,
Yeah,
and they didn't want to have to supply them. So they actually run a smear campaign in all the gun magazines and the newspapers and stuff, going, "Oh, those Damascus barrels are dangerous. You don't want to shoot those." And part of what helped to convince people is before World War One, there was really no specifications on shotgun cartridge length. So you
okay.
had 2-inch long cartridges and 2 and 9/16 and 2.5. You had to buy the shells that fit the chamber in your gun. So
Yeah,
around World War One, they standardized 2 and 3/4 inch shotgun shells. That's what everybody was going to. So you had people buying 2 and 3/4 inch shotgun shells and jamming them in 2-inch chambers and shooting them and blowing up these Damascus gun barrels. And so these people who wanted to smear it, they were
I
showing
see.
all these pictures of blown up Damascus barrels, going, "See, they're not safe," and to
Right.
convince customers not to ask for Damascus gun barrels anymore. So,
Uh-huh.
in fact, there are now thousands of people, collectors around the world, who own 100-year-old and more old Damascus barreled shotguns and shoot them all the time. And they have Damascus barreled trap shoots, and yeah, they're
That's so
they're
cool.
perfectly safe with the
That's
right cartridges.
right. So they're that's so
Yeah.
ridiculous.
So
Because I can't imagine that the Damascus was really that large of a market anyways. Like you were saying, there weren't that many people making it.
yeah,
And so yeah, how could you be so threatened by it?
well,
Uh, that you have to run a smear campaign? Because not everybody can afford them anyways
yeah. Well,
either.
they just want people to quit asking for them because they just want them to buy their steel barrels and quit asking for Damascus barrels. They didn't want to go back into business of making them, and Delcourt, he
Yeah,
couldn't supply everybody's needs for it. So,
sure.
I mean, there was a lot of, well, like Dyson went around, and I don't know when he did it, in the 90s maybe, went around Europe and bought these tubes up.
Okay.
He said in Belgium, he goes, you go to anybody's house and everybody has Damascus napkin rings on their dining room tables because
Yeah, for
yeah, all
sure.
these tubes laying around, they make different stuff out of them, and everybody's got Damascus napkin rings. And
That
but
is so
these
funny.
burl tubes are scattered all over the countryside, and he just went around, bought them up for scrap metal price, and I
Right.
don't know how many he's got. And for a while, um, Greener Shotgun Company isn't
Yeah.
never went out of business, but it's back in family ownership again. It was a family company. At some point, they were sold. I don't know who owned them, but
Yeah.
Graham Greener, a descendant of the Greener family, bought it again. I don't know, 15, 20 years ago. And he was having, you could buy, I think you still can buy a brand new Greener shotgun, and you can get Damascus tubes supplied for it.
Oh, wow.
And what he's doing is buying tubes from Peter Dyson. There's a
Oh,
gentleman in England Dyson is sending these tubes to and having him
mhm.
bore those tubes out and then send
Okay.
them back to Greener. And Greener's chambering them and putting them together and
Oh, wow. So they're historic gun
yeah,
barrels
there's
that have been laying around being finally finished out,
yeah, these
basically.
tubes have got to be they're made before World War One, probably. I mean,
Oh, wow. So cool.
DuPont, Delcourt DuPont made some, but we have no identification on. We don't know where they come from. They're just raw
Sure.
tubes, and I've bought tubes from Dyson, and I mean they still got
Oh,
hammer
that's
marks
so
in them.
interesting.
That come out of a blacksmith
Yeah,
shop.
that's
But
yeah, I just pulled up I did pull up Peter Dyson's website. It's Peter Dyson spelled
yeah,
Dyson.co.uk. And he's got a website up there. It's got guns, rifle, pistols. Yeah, he's got all this different stuff. Um, that is so intriguing. Part of me like wants to just go and buy a barrel.
yeah, they're fun to play with.
They're not even that like. Oh, I see. And they're kind of
Yeah,
expensive, but
about three
still,
hundred dollars for a I don't know 18
yeah,
feet,
I'm
18
seeing.
inch 2 foot long piece.
Yeah, I'm seeing 350 pounds, and I don't know what the exchange is right now,
Yeah,
but still, that's kind of cool price to pay for something with that kind of history, especially after watching that video. And Mike actually jumped in saying such a fascinating process, how much of this historical process um, informed you on your process for making the spiral welded Damascus
well,
barrels.
I did
That is
watch the video. Of course, I got in touch with Pete Michelajunas, who had the video, and Dr. Drew House, who's got Damascus Knowledge. It's damascus-knowledge.com. It's in Google Docs. Uh,
oh yeah,
that is like the compendium of all the world's knowledge on Damascus gun barrels. So
right.
I talked to both of those guys extensively and watched the video. But
Hmm.
when I contacted them, they pretty much all the gun collectors figured this to be a lost art. Nobody's ever going to figure out how to do this again. And I contacted them. I go, yeah, I'm trying to figure out how to do this again because I want to make them. And they were kind of like, yeah, let us know how that goes for you. and
Sure.
and so I did it. I made the little bitty pistol barrel. It's only 4 inches long, and
Right.
I sent it to Drew Howes, a picture of it and a video of my video of doing it. And up to that point, I didn't know anything about the Damascus, doublegunshop.com forums. And he
Right.
put it up there and sent me a link to it. And all these people are like, oh my gosh, this guy did it. And I'm like, really? It's that cool? I'm like, so
It's pretty
yeah.
cool.
But I guess really the most of it is, yeah, I watched the video and then kind of sorted out my own process.
Yeah.
You got to have the mandrels and all that. And then I built it. Of course, I'm doing it in propane forges. They were actually using charcoal forges back then, which really I think is
Yeah.
probably a lot easier. You
Sure.
can localize your heat a lot better than using a big old propane forge. That
Right.
actually become an issue for me. But
I can imagine there's some potential control issues just from the kind of restraints of having to heat up a large area rather than being able to, like you were
yeah,
saying, localize it and have a small area heated up.
well, I was trying to use my big Damascus welding forge initially for welding up a tube, and I could get the ends of the spiral wrap welded, but I could never get the middle welded. What I
Mm,
figured out
right.
was I'm having to put the whole tube or the whole wrap piece in my forge, bring the entire thing up to welding heat. So I'm bringing it out and pounding on the ends of it, and the soft ends are absorbing all my impact, all my hammer blows.
Because the force isn't transferring through the length.
Exactly. I couldn't get enough energy transferred to the middle. That's
Yeah.
why I made up that little bitty forge, which it's like the the chimney on it's
Yeah.
like 2 1/8 inches diameter. It was
Yeah.
cast around a piece of PVC pipe with a little cross through. so I can heat up like 2 inches at a time. And then I
Yeah.
never take it out. I got the adjustable anvil plate on the back of it that I can set up so I can drive it against and walk my way down the barrel tube.
Right.
So, but yeah, I could not ever get the center turns welded, and I would literally spend so much time beating and hammering and reheating on it that I would just oxidize away the whole wrap thing, and finally
Hmm.
the I've ate up the whole outside of it's gone, and I'm down to where I don't have anything left because I can't get it welded. So I
Yeah.
wrecked a whole lot of Damascus trying to make gun barrel tubes out of it. A lot, but
Yeah. Yeah, I believe it. And oh gosh, I think you were starting to say something else, and I actually kind of interrupted you
okay.
with Mike's question. I guess I'll follow up with Mike's other question real quick while we're kind of answering a couple questions. He says, you mentioned that cut and shoots are impractical and showpieces and kind of more of showpieces. What are your current favorite projects that you like and are enjoying working on?
Okay. Well, I right now I consider myself to be like semi-retired. I don't
Okay.
really. I've got customers out there waiting for me to make something for them one of these days. I hope I
Hmm.
live long enough to get back to them. But right now, I'm having fun making stuff for my kids and grandkids. I got 4 kids and their spouses and 11 grandkids, and I
Right.
ain't made stuff for all them yet. So right
Sure.
now I'm making stuff for them, and I'm having a blast because I'm making what I want to make. So I'm making
Yeah.
complicated stuff, and so like, well, gee, if I say all this, what I'm making on here, then my grandkids watch this, they'll know what I'm working on, won't they?
Yeah.
Hey, Grandpa's working on a knife for me.
You just got to keep the link away from
Yeah,
them for a couple more
yeah.
years or
But
whatever.
but anyway, so I'm making stuff for them, but I do have several cool items in the works that I'm working on that maybe they do know about. I'm working on a cut and shoot piece, but uh, and also an automatic with a release mechanism that I've not seen anybody do, and they're fairly complicated. I'm wondering if I'm as smart as I think I am because I'm kind of struggling with the mechanicals on them, but
I see.
but I'll get there. But yeah, I've got a mosaic Damascus Bowie knife I'm working on for somebody, and it's
Okay.
actually a piece of, well, the chain pattern stuff.
Oh, right.
I
Okay.
was working on a chain pattern that was in the Damascus gun barrels, and uh, it
Yeah.
my attempt was a near miss. It was close, but
It's
you have to
close.
weld up a monstrous billet of it, or I did. And so I had all this
Yeah.
Damascus that I'm like, now what am I going to do with this? Because I don't want to do that pattern again. So I stuck it in my press and mashed it in. I actually split it in my press, mashed it all up, RIG
Oh,
welded it, twisted it, and welded the
yeah.
rods up into a Bowie knife blade. So it looks really cool now. 4 weight it, and
Yeah.
so I'm well into building it. I should have it done pretty soon. So,
Yeah.
but
Um, and you said that you're kind of stepping away. Well, I mean, I mean, I guess it sounds like you got a cut and shoot you're kind of working
yeah,
on. Um, but are you wanting to keep doing that work? Because I was just like, I'm doing the math now in my head, and you're a couple of years from being
yeah.
70, and which is, excuse my language, but it's fucking impressive. Sorry,
Yeah.
grandkids. I am super impressed, and you're still rocking and rolling, which honestly inspires me that I can for still another 30, maybe 40 years be rocking and rolling and doing this kind of work and continuing to innovate and continue. It's impressive that you're continuing to innovate and you have these new ideas and still coming up with new stuff. Um, it's I mean, it doesn't seem like you're slowing down, but maybe it's just like with the frequency of builds you're doing a year or something like that, then maybe you're slowing down. But I don't know. It's really inspiring, honestly, to
Well,
me,
thank you. And
to be doing this work.
um, I'm not doing the knife shows like I was because, like I said, right
Sure.
now I'm not really wanting customers, but I certainly don't want to be out of the business and like going to hammer ins and stuff. And teaching,
Right.
and I've got several local guys that I'm mentoring along, so spend time with them. As far as the shop work, uh, I got to entertain myself. I can't sit around. I got to do something to entertain myself. And as you get older, you find out your brain doesn't age. You look in the mirror and go, "Who's that old guy?" And but I,
It still works the same. You
yeah,
just on the outside, you're looking different.
yeah. You're like, "Who's
Yeah.
that?" And I mean, a lot of people know I did have some serious health issues here some time back, and that kind of
Yeah.
wakes you up too. You have a good chance of dying and get through it, and you're like, oh wow,
Right.
the thing with making stuff for the grandkids is like, hey old man, you haven't been thinking about your time getting short, and I was like, I better get on
Right.
that. But
Yeah.
but you know how it is making custom knives and doing what the customer wants, and there's stuff you just don't get around to doing, and so
Yeah.
I'm doing the things I wanted to do, and I'm just having the more fun I've ever had now. But yes, the as you get older, the heavy shop work gets more difficult and just wears you out quicker. So
Yeah.
I've had and I'm having to do, not like our home is falling apart, but home maintenance projects I had to put off.
Sure. You got your honey-do list
Well,
still.
yeah, and I've had 4 major surgeries in the last 5.5 years, and each one of
Right.
those was 4 months of recovery. And so the last
Right.
5.5 years, I spent 16 months sitting on the couch. Well, things get behind and you get out of shape. And so, but
Sure.
no, right now I'm doing great. No worries. You know,
I'm
it's
glad to
like
hear.
everybody's got some little health issue they got to be concerned about. And I do a couple things, but no reason to be concerned. And I'm doing great. But staying busy and having a blast.
Good. I have a picture of your, as you referred to it, your near miss
Yeah.
that I pulled off your website of the chain pattern.
Yes.
And this is this a coffin handle
Yes.
buoy?
Yes.
Okay. Can you tell me a little bit about this piece and when you built it?
I built that several years ago and I still have it laying around. Um,
What?
yeah, well, as you see all that nice nickel silver dead space all over that handle frame.
Okay.
My full intention was to fully engrave all that before I put it
Oh,
together.
I got
And I had a knife show coming up, and I thought, oh, I need another knife on the table. I'll go ahead and put the handle on this. And
I
I
see.
was like, oh, now I'm going to hate engraving that. That's going to be difficult. And yes, I could pay somebody to do it, but I'm like, no. But I still had it. It's still in my knife in my gun safe, and but the pattern, yeah, that was my near attempt, close encounter with chain pattern. Uh,
Hmm.
Chain pattern has a center stack of flat materials in the middle of the billet.
Right.
My error was that my center stack was physically too large in relation to the full dimension of the billet,
Oh,
and my
okay.
pieces that form the chain link they were made out of too thin a material and too
I see.
outboard in the stack. They were too close to the outer edges. And
Hmm.
so when it was twisted, it pulled the links out into the little corners of the
In the corners
of
of
the
the
wrap.
twist.
And
Right.
so it distorted my chain links. And so it was close, but
Yeah.
not quite. But that taught me the error of my ways, what I needed to change.
And is that what gave birth to this diagram? Was the
Yes, and
reworking of that?
yes, partly it is.
Okay.
I think, yes, that looks like the illustration that is the correct pattern.
Okay.
Um, when I made that knife, I had not seen this yet.
Sure.
I had figured all that pattern out and I had all the pieces right. I
Wow.
just had the dimensions wrong. Just
Sure.
reverse engineered it by looking at photos of
Yeah.
gun barrels. Um, if we get around to talking about the Thor software,
Yeah. Hey,
well,
talk about it now.
there is a software that you can download that will show you what your billet's going to look like after you twist it and it will allow you to display it at different grinding depths. What's it going to look like as you grind it down through the depths? It's called Thor, and the latest version is Thor 2.
I'm gonna do a screen share real quick, just to.
Okay.
The link isn't a viable link on your website, but this does give people an idea of what you're kind of
Yes.
talking about, just with this screenshot.
Yeah. This software, I actually learned of it from, I'm talking and drawing a blank here, the guy in Argentina.
Manuel.
Manuel. Yeah.
Right.
Manuel Gonzalez.
I can last name.
I'll pull it up here. Oh, you're getting it. Anyway.
I'm pulling it up. I got it.
I was talking to Manuel about this Damascus gun barrels because he was interested. And he asked me if I had used Thor for sorting some of this out. And I was like, Thor? What's that?
What's that mean? Oh,
And
man, that's amazing.
And he starts telling me about it. And I go, I've never heard of it. And he goes, oh, well, all us guys down here in Argentina have it. I was like, how do you have it in Argentina and nobody up here in America knows about it?
Right.
So he sent me a copy or a link to it to download.
Yeah.
And in it was an about screen. And it was made by a fellow by the name of Christian Schnurra. Christian lives in Germany. He's a blacksmith. And the original version of Thor would only work like on Windows 95.
Right. It was a PC version.
Yeah. So I sent an email to Christian, and he doesn't speak English. He only speaks German. So we use Google Translate. I go, told him who I was.
For Google Translate.
Yeah. And I told him who I was. And I said, have you thought about updating it? And he goes, actually, I've been thinking about it. Let me work on it. And so like in a couple of months, he popped this one up that works on Windows 10, and he added a whole bunch of cool features of multiple languages, and you can four-way your billets, and it's really cool.
Yeah.
But anyway, in that, Christian had a picture of the chain pattern billet.
Okay.
And I said, where did you get that? And he goes, oh, it's in a book that Manfred Zoxy wrote. And he goes, I don't think you've seen it. And Manfred, there's what book is it? Manfred wrote, big book.
Yeah, actually, I just got that book.
It's been translated to English.
I have it on my bedstand. You keep talking, and I'll go grab it.
Yeah. So anyway, he goes, well, Manfred wrote before that wrote a small book. It's called Alles über Damascus Steel, whatever. But the title in English is All About Damascus Steel. And it's a little paperback book. It's not very large, not a lot of pages. But in that book is a photograph that Manfred took at some museum of the cut-off ends of a bunch of gun barrel Damascus. And one of those cut-off ends is chain pattern. So I bought the book and got it. And anyway, yeah.
But this is the English version.
That's the English version.
Steel, myth, history, technology, and applications.
Yeah, it looks like mirror image of you when you're holding it up.
Oh yeah, I gotta do a whole camera thing. Oh, whoops.
Anyway, at one point, I asked Christian. I said, "Gosh, I wonder where Manfred found that." And he goes, "Oh, let me go ask him." I was like, "Manfred is his neighbor or something, And
right.
Manfred couldn't remember. He goes, "Oh, some museum in Belgium. I don't know where it was." So,
right. Oh, look at this page I just opened up too.
Yeah.
That was literally the first page I opened up to.
Yeah, some of the Damascus barrel guns.
Yeah.
So anyway, that gave me some better dimensions on what was wrong with my billet. And so the sketch that Mareko just put up there was my sketch that I made in Corel Draw, where I can actually put a photograph up in Draw and physically measure it on the screen to come up with measurements. Wow. If I know the width on something, or like on that, I blew the photo that Manfred took up to like a 3-inch square,
Yeah.
and then went in and physically measured all the pieces to find out that, dimensions on these center stack pieces. And
And this is the
so,
original down in the
yeah,
bottom right quadrant.
yeah, that's the original photo. But you can see the height and width of the center stack and how
Yeah.
thick. I determined that from that photo, the chain link parts should have been at the billet dimensions I use. I should have made them 3/8 of an inch thick. Mine were only a 1/4 inch thick.
I see.
So, and my center stack was wider. It was all out of 1/8 inch thick material, which didn't work out. So,
Well,
but
and that
one,
amplifies perfectly how the original stack really informs what the pattern ends up looking like, and how very even small dimensional changes from, like you were saying, what was it, 3/8 or was it
yeah,
3/4? Yeah, to a quarter, a 30% difference in dimension,
yeah,
or 33% change in dimension changes everything of how overall presentation, especially in the finished piece.
yes.
Yeah.
One thing I'd like to mention. Oh, I think I mentioned to you earlier while we was talking,
Yeah.
the Damascus gun barrel patterns. They had dozens of patterns.
Yeah.
A lot of them were combinations of the same original stacking arrangement. I was intending to put together. I went in a reverse. Drew House sent me photos of hundreds of photos of Damascus gun barrels. I
Hmm.
went in, reverse engineered all the patterns, and
Wow.
come up with the stacking arrangements and got them laid out like that chain pattern
Yeah.
in sketches. And
Yeah.
I was going to do like a coffee table book of Damascus gun barrel patterns, and
Let's see.
I doubt that's ever going to happen. But yeah, there's some of the photos.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
I have all those patterns, those Damascus gun barrel things, and I want to put them up at some point.
I
But
think that would be great.
I have a PDF document on my website, I think on the tutorials page.
Okay. Here,
On
I'll do a
there,
screen share.
there were old Damascus gun barrels that had words in it, people's names in the patterns.
Right.
And the guys on
Let's go back.
the double gunshot forums asked me, so how do they make all these patterns? Oh, hey, is that the Thor 2 download? That's the correct one down there.
Oh, okay.
There's the correct one. That one is
It's on the
right.
tutorials page.
Yeah. Where's mine that I put up?
Perfect.
Maybe I don't have it on there. Anyway, I have
Okay.
a document. It's on my Facebook page. I know that.
Okay.
I put together a document about how they put words in Damascus patterns.
Yeah.
And I used all the old Damascus shotgun tube pictures that we had. It,
Mm-hmm.
well, it was the guys on the double gunshot forums, all these collectors, they owned these guns with words in the patterns, but they had no concept about how they got there. But they really didn't have any concept about how Damascus was made anyway,
Right.
anything.
Sure.
So the document starts out being extremely elementary because it was written for these gun collectors,
I
but
see.
it goes in how Damascus made, what happens when you twist a pattern,
Oh,
but it
wow.
goes into how all these Damascus, how words are put into a pattern. And it's really pretty fascinating, I think, because um, I'm trying to figure, my brain's going here. What did I do with that document? I thought it was on there. Uh,
You should put
anyway,
it on your books tab
yeah, I need to or
on your
something.
website. You have a
Yeah,
tab called books, and it's got your slip joint, which we haven't gotten to yet, but that would
I
be
thought it was.
probably a good spot for that.
I thought it was on the website, but yeah, I need to get it up there somewhere. I thought it was on there. But anyway, it goes through how those words were put in. There is one shotgun that was quite a bit different in how it was put together
Okay.
than all the others, and I lay it out completely. It was a shotgun that was made for President Chester Arthur.
Oh,
And
interesting.
it says A. Arthur President in the pattern.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh my.
They laid up the words in the pattern different, but I
Right.
describe how all that's done. But I think it'd be pretty fascinating to anybody that wants to work at doing that and really gain a good understanding of how wrapped patterns wind up with the pattern being displayed. So
Yeah. Well, and it's honestly for me, twist patterns, like I think part of the reason I understood mosaics and deconstructing them so well is because that's where I had the most experience. And I basically have done no pattern welding with twists.
yeah,
And so for me, twists were always just like this enigma trying to figure it out. And I finally, it was actually thanks to the Thor program, as well as several illustrations that, or even just like bars that are ground down to certain percentage to
yeah,
reveal various depths through a bar, that helped me to kind of wrap my head around what was going on. But you see like the Turkish ribbon, and you see all the kind of like
yeah,
some of that's ladder, some of that's twist stuff, Turkish twist, like how those patterns play together have always been tricky, because what looks like just a standard grid on the end, like we're showing with this, like what it looks like at the end of the billet looks nothing
yeah,
like what it represents after it's been twisted.
yeah,
And then like obviously the density of the twist plays a role. And it's pretty interesting. But yeah, it's very cool to hear you talk about reverse engineering the twist patterns, because twists are probably, to me, are some of the most challenging, because there is so much distortion from the twisting.
yeah,
It becomes very tricky to follow where things are at, and trying to lay out a grid or kind of an organization of what that original billet might have looked like.
yeah. That's a reverse engineering all them gun barrel patterns is. I was lucky enough to get some good photos, but you're literally looking at every single piece of Damascus, and
Yeah,
there were a few, and it helped me confirm it. In the video where they was doing the scarf weld, the two pieces,
sure.
they would try to hide that scarf weld underneath the forearm because you could
Right.
see it.
Yeah.
But it was, since they scarfed it out, it was like literally laying the billet out on end. And
Yeah.
so sometimes you could see it, and it was like the end cut off a billet
I
all laid
see.
out flat. And
Right.
so it could help me confirm that I had it right.
I'm actually going to do another screen share. This is over on Damascus Knowledge, and this page it doesn't show really the end pieces, but it does show the many examples of different um,
Ye-
gun barrel patterns. Let's see. Let's
mm,
try to zoom in here a little bit closer to get
Yeah,
a
those
look
are
at this.
those are Bernard. That's
Hmm.
the stack stuff. That's what my pistol barrel is made of.
Yeah. And then this next one
That's
is
Bernard
another.
yet.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going
This.
to step away for just a second.
Yeah. So I'm gonna zoom out back out of this again. Let's see. This is the Bernard, same pattern, different material, obviously different maker. And this is a Moshe. Um, Another, again, you can kind of see, oops, um, especially with that I guess I don't know. I'll have to ask Steve what that part is, but the center part, um, how that pattern is laid up with basically bold material through the middle, and then fine material at the edges, finer squares basically, and you can see that. And what's always so interesting is it looks like, if you're looking at the actual barrels, the finer squares comprise the main pattern through the middle, and the bold stuff, at least this is the way my brain always works, the bold stuff always looks like it's on the outside, but it's actually vice versa. The bold stuff is almost always in the middle, and the fine pattern material is always on the outer edge. And so let's see, this next one, Wellington, I believe. No, Etoile.
Uh, I'm
Etoile.
sorry. I wanted to go get something. I thought I could find it.
Oh, you're good.
I have a. You were talking about how if you grind down through the billet, how the pattern's different.
Right.
I have a demonstration piece made by Jerry Rados where
Okay.
he did that with the Turkish Damascus, and I thought I knew where I had it, and I thought it was nearby, but I couldn't.
Right.
Apparently, it's not where I thought it was, but It's in that PDF that I put together.
Yeah, I'll have to. That'll be. And so that is that a personal page or is that a like a business page over on Facebook?
Um, I think I've shared it on both, but I do have a business page on Facebook that
Hmm.
it's Steve Culver and I's
Okay.
Facebook page. You can get there through my personal page. I might I might go fetch that and put it up on my personal Facebook page, and then it'll be easy access. It's easy for
Okay.
me to share it over on my personal page for anybody who wants to see it.
Yeah. So this is some of that chain pattern Damascus,
Yes.
how it's kind of the more traditional and kind of, I don't know if a proper presentation is the right word or whatever, but that's, you can see why it's called the chain because of how it literally looks like links of chains flowing around the barrel of the pattern or of the shotgun barrel.
The first time I saw that pattern was in
Hmm.
Washington, Arkansas,
Okay.
at the school down there. A couple blocks away, there's a gun museum, or there was.
Okay.
And so I don't know, it had to been 89 or 90. I was down there
Yeah.
for a class for hammer in, and I went to that gun museum, and they had a double barrel Ithaca shotgun sitting in there with chain pattern on it. And it just blew me away. And I was like, I want to make that pattern someday.
Yeah.
I was
Well,
like,
and it's interesting is out of all the different patterns, this is the one that I think has eluded people the most.
it has. Yeah. Well,
So can you dive into some of your I don't know what to call it, but your explorations and trying to recover. I mean, we've talked about it a little bit already,
mhm.
but kind of how long you've been working on it. It sounds like you just shared like when you first saw it, and I mean, has this been kind of the goal, this pattern, the whole time you've been trying to figure out these gun barrels and everything, or
Well,
how has that kind of evolved for you?
this pattern here was one that really piqued my interest in Damascus barrels. Now, being a gunsmith, I was familiar with Damascus barrels, used to own a Damascus barrel shotgun. So
Okay.
certainly knew about them for years, but this particular pattern just fascinated me, well, for the longest time. I
Yeah.
mean, there are some other patterns now that I'm pretty amazed at that you scrolled through that I'm like, wow, that's really cool too.
Yeah.
But I think the chain pattern has stumped a lot of people for a long time. It's when you get into it and look closely at it and discern where the weld lines are
Sure.
between the individual rods
Right.
that you discover the chain links are not the center of the billet, they're out on the edge of the billet.
Right.
And so you're welding two rods together, you're welding half a chain on each side. They come together in the middle where you do the scarf or where you will do the center weld between them to create a what appears to the eye to be a full chain.
Right.
And it itself, if you look close at it, it's nothing like a chain. It's an optical illusion. It's really a
Right.
sloppy mess, but but at a distance, at a quick glance, it does look very much like chain.
Yeah, it is a very good effect for sure. But and this is still one you're working on developing, right? And working to replicate properly.
Yeah, I have a project. Like I said, one didn't really want customers, but I was offered a project that I'm fascinated with, and
Okay,
I won't throw any names out there, but I've been
sure.
asked to make basically a Damascus barrel sleeve to go on a single action army revolver that's going to be custom built.
Oh wow.
And I would really like to do it in chain pattern.
Yeah.
But then I've also got a customer who is a good friend who has asked me to make him a chain pattern hunting knife to go with his chain pattern shotgun that he hunts with. So
Oh wow. So he has a chain pattern shotgun.
yes. And
Wow.
he wants a hunting knife to go with it. You know him.
I
I'm not
do.
going to throw any names out here, but you know him.
Yes, I do. I didn't realize that he had a chain pattern
Yeah.
shotgun though.
Yes, he does.
Well, that
That he
makes sense why he
uses.
wants the matching knife.
Uh-huh.
Now I get it.
One thing that has concerned me, and
Uh-huh.
I don't know how has crossed my mind. Concern might be a strong word,
Okay.
but The original stuff was made out of wrought iron and very low alloy steel,
Hmm.
and it's really, really soft.
Sure.
And if you try to make this out of, and you've made the attempt now and did pretty
Yeah.
good, you give me some confidence making it out of like 1084 and 15N20.
Yeah.
15N20 is a lot tougher than 1084, even at heat.
Right.
Will they distort properly during the
Mm,
twisting process
sure.
because of the difference in toughness?
Right. Kind of the rate at which they deform and
Yeah,
twist.
and
Right.
that was one of the questions on that knife blade that I made was part of the problem. The 15N20 was so tough.
Yeah.
Now, I realized I did have a dimensional problem too, but that's been a concern. But the one you attempted, I think it come out pretty good. That gave me some confidence that that could work.
Yeah, yeah. And so you're referring, so I did that with Steve when I was down there working with Steve because he definitely has the setup for doing it. And I don't know if my attempt is on this diagram here. Let's see. I'm gonna stop that one. Mine is not. So what we're seeing is Salem Straub in the top left quadrant is Salem Straub's. Top right quadrant is an original chain. Bottom right quadrant is the original cross section of an original billet, and then the bottom left is Steve's work. I'd have to email, or I have it right here. I'll just work on texting it. But yeah, you actually turned me on to trying to kind of figure this out, and I've seen your attempts and Salem's attempts. Like if I pull this back up, I think um, yours and Salem kind of have a similar distortion issue,
Yeah,
where it kind of curls back up in a way that isn't desirable, um, where the chains kind of meet. And then I think Salem's is actually a little bit too tight. It could use a little elongation to kind of create more of that elongated chain effect. Because if you see in the top right quadrant, the original, they are kind of almost kind of a lazy twist in a way, if you think about it. And in regards to the actual dimension of these in the
yes.
originals, it was basically one full rotation for about an inch to an inch and a quarter.
Yeah, if you look at that, every star, the center stack stuff, as
Yeah.
it is with Turkish Damascus and stuff like that, every of the one of the little stars,
Hmm.
that's a half a twist. You create that at every half twist.
Yeah.
So you see that is a really a slow rotation, and it is a slow rotation for even Damascus gun barrel material.
Yeah.
Other patterns I've seen were twisted a lot tighter than that.
Way tighter.
Yeah.
And that was one of the things that actually is kind of confusing about it, is because it kind of is counterintuitive in that way, that
Yes, it is.
it's a lazier twist rather than a super tight twist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's something that of the few documents we got, I mentioned there were some folks that wrote about how Damascus gun barrels were made,
Right.
and they're all messed up, and some of them was stating twist rates and just
Okay.
insane twist rate. Well, they twisted the Damascus at this many twists per inch and all that.
Hmm.
Well, they didn't understand what they were looking at. They were looking at the twisted rods, and there are Damascus demonstration rods that you can find them on the Damascus Knowledge. They were like salesman's demonstration rods, the twisted rods for the gun barrels.
Sure.
Twisted rods, welded into a ribbon, twisted, welded, and made into a gun barrel. And they looked at them and they go, "Oh, the twist rates are like 300 per inch or some crazy
Oh
thing."
my
But
god.
they didn't know what they was looking at. A square
Right.
rod, when you twist it, every rotation, the
Yeah.
four squares create four ridges. So they were counting ridges, counting them as a full rotation, and they didn't understand what they were looking at.
No.
So they stated insane twist rates. But again, people who are not blacksmiths trying to speak on something they know nothing about. So
Yeah. I think I think this is one of the examples you're referring to. Let me just jump in here and share the page again.
Yeah, yeah. That's an illustration, but there are samples, actual
Yeah.
samples left over.
Yep.
And it shows the chemise, the tube-looking thing in the
Yep.
center. One
Hmm.
thing I wanted to go back. When Pete had the video, he put all the captions in, and he
Right.
used the word tin
Right.
for. And I said, "Why did you say that?" And he goes, "Oh, I don't know." He goes, "Just because it reminded me of a tin can. It was thin and
Oh,
wasn't very thick material." And I go, "Well, it's not tin."
yeah.
But I have, and I've had messed with pieces of old barrel tubes that I got from Dyson that had the chemise in them.
Okay.
It doesn't really. My first thought was that ought to be wrought iron, but I don't see the silica strands in it.
Right.
And I've cut pieces of it off. It is magnetic, so it is ferrous. But I'm saying this stuff is about as close as you could get to pure iron as possible. It's like
Right.
I see no alloys in it. I'd like to have somebody do some. I'd like to see Kevin Cashin do a test on some of that. Um, Dr. Drew did send. Well, it was a blown up Damascus barrel
Okay.
that
Like
he sent.
actually destroyed, blown up.
Yeah,
Okay.
somebody had fired it. It blew up at a shotgun competition, and the barrel tube was plugged. Something happened. The barrel tube was plugged. It blew up because of obstruction in the bore. So, but he spent thousands of dollars to have it tested,
Yeah.
but professionally under the microscopes, the whatever's
Oh,
the
like the
fine.
electron microscope.
Yeah, yeah. Even they couldn't discern very much because it's welded up in a Damascus and it's so congealed together that they couldn't really come up with any solid definition of what is this.
Sure.
But they did analyze it, and overall, they said the overall Damascus material came out as something like 1005 steel, just very, very low, almost no carbon, almost no alloys in it. They could see the silica in it, but yeah, virtually nothing.
Yeah. I'm just scrolling through. Oh, you can see the scarf weld right there, like you were talking
Yes,
about, where
yes,
you can, because usually the way scarf weld works is you forge a taper at the end of the bar, and if it's a mosaic Damascus, basically cross section bar, you're laying that open, you're laying that out,
yes.
and you can see what that end cross section looks like right there.
That pattern, that's all these patterns had a whole bunch of different names.
Sure.
Well, they best London Damascus twist. Okay, that is actually the Bernard pattern. If you
Okay.
scroll up a little bit,
Yep.
okay,
Like this
that's
one.
Bernard.
Yep.
Both of those billet arrangements are exactly the same. Bernard pattern is where you twist the rod, and the one that you looked at down below that is what you get if you do not twist that rod.
I see. It's
And
interesting. You can actually see that scarf weld on this Bernard pattern example
yeah,
too.
yeah,
Oh, you can see it says it right there. Ribbon end on.
yeah.
Yeah.
And that, for some reason, that's a mistake. That's the center rib, the siding rib down the center between them barrel tubes. And,
It's
you
like the
know,
worst place to have that.
yeah, it's like they never did that. It was like, I'm going to guess when they forged, and there's if you scroll down a little bit again,
Yep.
there's the billet arrangement that's the stacked together square rods.
Right.
Yeah. My guess is when they weld those barrels up in the blacksmith shop, they weld the lumps, the part that goes down in the bottom of the gun barrel action.
Okay.
And I'm going to guess they had the tube oriented rod. Excuse me.
You're good.
They had the tube oriented rod incorrectly when they forged the lumps on the bottom of that tube.
I see.
And so it had to be put together that way. But to the untrained eye, who's going to see that,
Yeah, you're not going to know what's going on.
Yeah, we see
But
it because we make Damascus.
right. Yeah. And it's more than anything, like you're kind of saying right now, is it's more aesthetics.
Yeah,
Structurally, I mean, this is a very clean, solid piece of material.
very.
That's really hard to bulk against. I like. There's actually, I wouldn't say that, at least in this section of the barrel, it looks pretty flawless.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive.
Well, and interestingly, when Drew had that blown up gun barrel tested,
Uh-huh.
the idea behind the testing, there was a lot of people that say Damascus would rip apart at the welds, and
Okay.
was part of the trashing Damascus gun barrel, like, oh, them welds get rust between them, and they'll blow apart at the welds and all that.
Yeah.
And they were doing this super testing on this thing, and there was like no part of the destruction in this ripped apart at the welds. It was across the welds,
I see.
no welds come apart in this gun being blown apart. So
Right.
that for the Damascus community, the gun collector community, was huge information for them.
Yeah.
So
So I did find a comparison. So we have Manuel's material in the top left quadrant,
okay,
then Salem's in the top right, and then we have yours in the bottom left, and then mine in the bottom right.
yeah,
And it's you can see it in, yeah, just the same kind of distortion effect that you experienced in your material. Looks like Salem and Manuel did it cheat or experience that as well in theirs. I think on mine, part of the some of the material near the outer edge, and you can actually it's very well illustrated, like you were saying before. The chains are actually on the outside of the bar.
yeah,
It illustrates it quite well right there, that is the outside of the bar, not the core of the bar. But I think in the future, I think the next time around, the core material needs to be a little bit finer. Actually, kind of like Manuel's is. I really like the density of his,
yeah.
just because
His
it
looks
really
good
helped
there.
isolate the chain really nicely. It just didn't have quite the effect I know he was trying to go for. But it really helps to isolate and kind of have those final, the contrast, I guess, or juxtaposition, I guess you can call it, between the bolder chain elements and the finer kind of intermediary kind of patterns through the middle of that bar.
Yeah,
So, but yeah, I still have to get that material welded together and do something interesting. I do have a new Damascus welding process that I'm using that I think will be a fun approach for this. And I think the reason is for my concept is to create a similar effect and aesthetic that the double barrel shotguns with the sight rib down the middle, to create that all of that same aesthetic in what would be a dagger blade.
oh yeah,
But it'll be kind of tricky to get all that material welded in those different orientations, because that is not typically how twisted material is welded. But I think I'll get it to come together nicely. But I have yet to do it. We'll see.
I did a dagger blade like that
Oh, nice.
years ago. It was down at the school in Washington. They used to have a class called Bladesmithing Lab,
Okay.
and Jerry Fisk and Harvey Dean taught it. And you could bring whatever project you wanted to make, and it was a week-long class, and they would sit there and help you with your project. And
Oh, wow.
I used to go every year. Would go down there and take that class, but I did one that had a ladder pattern bar down the middle, and then 4 twisted bars on each side,
Yeah.
and forward welded together at the tip and everything. And
Yeah.
I don't even know what I did with that. I never did make
Oh,
it.
no.
I don't. It's probably out there in my shop somewhere out there. I never did make anything out of it.
Oh, that's a cool concept though. Like to create kind of a lab situation where you bring your project, you're working on it, and the makers, those talented makers, are there to kind of help you troubleshoot as you work through your process.
Yeah.
And then you go home and
Oh, it was great fun. I
Yeah.
loved it. And of course,
I like that.
hanging around with Jerry and Harvey all day long. If all of us would go home or go back to the motel room every night, and our faces hurt from laughing so much.
Sure.
Those guys are fun.
Yeah. I'm trying to think. I had, I can't remember. I feel like I had something else I was about to bring up. So you do on your website, you have a very good, and really in depth, honestly, book about slip joints. And
Oh,
I was wondering if you wouldn't mind sharing and talking about that a little bit, um, because I feel like you have some really great insights. And again, coming from your kind of mechanically minded background, you've done a really good job. And I remember you talking about this at the class I took from you at the New England School of Metalwork. Not really in depth, kind of touching on it, but just a few pointers that you brought up
sure.
were really great. And it looks like it's available on Chance Knife Supply.
Yes.
People
Yeah,
are
you can
interested
get
in
it from
getting the book.
Amazon, but Jance Supply sells it for me, or they have it.
Yeah,
They're the only vendor that I've given permission to
I
market
see.
my book. So,
Right.
um, that came out of Nick Rossi asked me to teach a class on
Okay.
slip joint folders up in the New England School.
Yeah.
And he sent me an email and said, "Can you teach a class, but we only have a junky bandsaw and a old drill press, no other tools?" I said, "Sure."
Sweet. Sounds like fun.
Yeah. So I figured out how to do it, even how to cut nail nicks with a Dremel tool,
Oh
and
wow.
I put all the stuff together, and I took it up there and taught the class. And well, I put it all on a flash drive, and I give it to Nick and had him print copies of it. Was basic my class lessons.
Yeah.
Well, then some folks heard that I had the lesson stuff, and they're like, "Hey, can I have a copy too?" And well, I didn't really want to be printing a whole lot of copies, you know. I mean,
Sure.
it's toner ink, and I was like, well, I seen where guys was doing self-publishing. I thought, well, if I self-publish this, then I can order copies to for people, and so that's how it kind of came about. That was literally my class lessons from that one class, and then
Yeah.
I went in and added some to it. But one of the things that I bring out in that is like if you're teaching and then explaining something, you need to make it logical. It needs
Okay.
to make sense.
Right.
And I'd had some guys when I was trying to learn how to make pocket knives was trying to explain to me how to design a pocket knife, and it wasn't logical. It was
Okay.
like it didn't make sense to me, and I was like, I should be able to explain this and make it make sense. And
Hmm.
so a part, so this describes how to make it make sense, and then a build process to how to build a pocket knife without a whole lot of expensive tooling and stuff.
Right.
No surface grinder and all that. So in a way, I'm almost embarrassed that I have this book out there.
Oh, really?
Well, I don't consider myself to be like a master pocket knife maker. I mean, my goodness, there's
Your work, you're full. I mean, those slip joints are
well,
really nice.
I make some decent pocket knives and
He
stuff,
makes some darn
but
nice ones,
but
I'd
you
say.
know, my goodness, there's guys out there, and there's guys that I've taught that I feel like they make better pocket knives than I do. But what I would say about my book is read my book as you know, a machinist instructor teaching you how to
Mm,
design it. That was
okay.
my whole purpose, and the purpose was once you understand the geometry of the slip joint lock, you can design any pocket knife after that, any slip joint pocket knife.
Right. Okay.
Nothing changes. The
Yep.
joint never changes. That's solid science. Nothing changes. The geometry is all the same. What goes ahead of it, what goes behind that joint can be entirely different, but the
Completely
joint
amazing.
never changes.
Right.
And
Mm,
it's like on my computer, I have that joint changed or
yeah.
designed. It's
Oh,
all
these are
laid
lovely.
out. And if I may want to make a different size pocket knife, I just grab the corners of the joint and pull it out bigger or smaller and put a blade on one end and a handle on the other. And I never redesigned the joint.
Well, I think I still feel like I mean, people should get the book for sure.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, it's a good book. I mean, it's good basic understanding, and you will understand what it takes to design the knife and
yeah.
an easy way to build them.
And this, I mean, this is probably one of the nicer, honestly, in general, slip joints that I've seen. It's very clean, I don't know. I'm a big fan of very kind of simpler folders.
Yeah.
But I do love the engraving embellishment work that you did, and you do your own engraving,
Yes, I do.
which is awesome. I mean, I'm looking at this and I'm like, holy smokes. There's still so much. Like, one, I don't even know how to make a slip joint folder, but then the engraving on top of that and the whole construction assembly process, like, I don't know any of that. And while I'm like, oh my God, I suck, I'm at the same time, I'm like, there's still so what's cool about knife making is just like there's constantly new stuff to learn all the time.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I see that. And again, I'm inspired by your work to continue to push myself and discover new things and processes and techniques.
Yeah, there's no end to what you can learn and what you can do. There's a few things that I'm not convinced that I should have got into night or into engraving.
Oh, really?
Well, yeah, here's the deal.
Okay.
I, I'm really good with a graver. I can
Sure.
cut lines really nice.
Okay.
You got to have lines to cut first.
Oh, do you struggle with the design
The
aspect?
design.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, you can go take a class and learn how to cut it, but somebody needs to ask you, well, can you design the artwork? Because if the artwork sucks, it don't matter how nicely you cut it, it's going to be ugly engraving.
Yeah, that's
Really.
fair. No, yeah,
You know,
that's fair.
so the artwork is the hardest thing for me, and I use my Corel Draw for my engraving artwork. I
I
and,
don't think
and
there's anything wrong with that. You're still the one that's designing and creating it, right?
well, yes, and that's very common. And there's a bunch of guys that uh, very well known uh, engravers do this. They doing it on iPads or something. I don't know how they're
Sure.
doing all that. So yeah, doing your engraving artwork on a computer or something, that's totally acceptable.
Yeah.
But I build a library of scrolls and leaves and stuff.
Okay.
As I create a new one, is like I keep that leaf over here. So
Yeah.
you know, I will take a knife and I put it on my flatbed scanner and I
Hmm.
scan it and I take the picture of it and put it in my Corel Draw and I can create, make an outline around like a pocket knife bolster.
Yeah.
And so then I can go grab a scroll and drag it on the bolster and turn it and shape it and go get a leaf and put it inside the scroll. And so,
That's great.
you know, I
I
got a
don't see
little,
a problem with that.
no, there's no problem with it at all. But even doing that, I don't feel I have all the proper knowledge of how to lay in the scrolls and lay in the leaves. And then when you do the shading, you can do all the main lines and cut them, but then you have to cut the shading lines and make
Right.
it look like one thing on top of another.
To give it depth.
Yeah, if you cut
Yeah.
the shading wrong, it doesn't make sense. So there's that.
Let's see. Oh, there's no engraving on that one. Sorry. I'm gonna jump back to that one. And I see what you're saying now. And it's I don't know. I like just still like even though you're laying things out, like you're still designing that layout, and then you still have to do all the work to cut it properly and get all those lines in the right place to create that sense of depth
Yep.
and that contrast from the background. I
Yep.
I don't know. I think it's pretty awesome. I'm a fan.
Well,
And going through a lot of the knives, the photo, you have a great gallery on your website, by the way. Anybody who's interested to see more of Steve's stuff, especially if you're listening to the audio version of this, go to Culver Art, Culver art.com. And he has a gallery. I think it's one of the first links at the top of his website. And he's got tons of information on there. Or tons of great photos of his work, past work. And I honestly, so you mentioned Tim Hancock earlier,
yeah.
and this Bowie reminded me of Tim Hancock's style.
Yep.
But this is definitely different from how I feel like or the pieces that I've seen of Tim Hancock's work. And I think this is probably one of my favorite pieces I ever seen of yours. And I remember, um, I can't remember if it was on somebody's website or on Blade Forums or on YouTube, but you doing kind of a demonstration on doing the frame handle, I believe.
Yeah. Yeah, that was filmed in my shop at
Okay.
2010 ABS Hammer in here.
Hmm.
Yeah. So ABS website's got it, I think.
Oh, you know what? That's probably actually where I did see it. But just these, and these are called dog bone
Dog bone handle. Yeah.
handles.
Yeah.
And is this a historical style?
Y-
I know Tim Hancock was very well known for them, and Mike Quisenberry has definitely carved out a name for himself
Yeah.
with these style knives. But I don't know the background of these knives, and I was wondering if you could share that with us a little bit.
Yes, it is a historic pattern. I'm
Okay,
completely drawing a blank on who built them.
perfect.
That's terrible.
No, you're good.
Well, I've done pretty good for an old man so far today. I
You're doing
remember just
great.
about everything, but I don't remember who originally did them. Uh, but yeah, that is a dog bone pattern. Um, that's close to the original. There were a couple of features in the original I did not include on this. It's some small grooves towards the dog bone, the back end of it. Some small grooves that were in some of them,
Okay,
but yeah, there's been a lot of really nice ones made in last what 10, 15 years. I
sure.
made that one. Oh man, yeah, I was a master smith when I made that one. That had to have been 2008, 2009, something like
Okay.
that. Another fellow that, well, he's passed away now, that made a number of really nice dog bones was John White.
Oh, right.
Man, I
Gosh,
knew
I feel
knew
terrible. I forgot
yeah,
about John White, but he was another maker when I was first starting out on my own, whose work constantly kept coming up.
yeah,
That I, or at least that I kept seeing, and I was just like, "That is awesome."
yeah. John was an incredible maker, and actually, after I made this one, John came to me and he goes, "How do you do that?" And so John and I spent some time together, me showing him what I did, and I made an attachment for my belt grinder
Oh,
that I use for grinding clips on knives,
sure.
but I use that grinder attachment for grinding the bevels on the dog bone handles. And John bought
Oh,
my attachment and used it on all his dog bone handles to grind them.
right.
And I made this knife. Well, I think I was still in the process of building it. I'd
Okay.
already done the grinding on the handle,
Yeah.
but I was like, and I thought it all up myself. This is how I figured out to do it. And I
Okay.
thought, I wonder how Tim does that. So I called Tim up. I go,
Okay.
hey Tim, how do you do that? He'd build an attachment just like that, and that's what he used on his grinder. And
Oh, funny.
his wasn't near as elaborate as mine was because he designed it just for doing the dog bone.
I got you.
But I have on my jigs and fixtures page
I was just gonna pull
pictures of
that
that.
up.
Yeah,
So on
and
your jigs and fixtures page, I learned a lot from this jigs and fixtures page, and I was when I first started doing integrals and I built my first grinder.
yeah, that's the clip grinding attachment.
Your integral grinding attachment was what inspired my integral grinding attachment.
Yeah,
Because I had that same small wheel holder and everything. But the clip grinding attachment you were talking about right here,
yeah,
God, there's so many great pictures. Let's see. We'll just start here. But it looks like it attaches and then it pivots.
yeah, and it works good. I mean, I've used it for a whole bunch of things. There's a who has it makes the DD tool rests.
Oh yeah.
Buy
Yeah.
one of those now. Don't build mine.
Don't
Buy
buy.
one of those. Honestly, for the money that he's charging for it, his
Hmm.
will do everything mine does, and honestly, a little better. Mine is a little bit limited at range, how
I
far
see.
you can tilt it
I
because of
see.
the joint mechanism. And well, I could piddle around with changing it some, but I'm saying go buy his.
It's pretty good.
Yeah, but it works, and it if you don't want to spend the money and you got scrap metal laying around, then build mine.
Sure.
But yeah, it works great.
Well, and this is, I think, what you did that's very unique. Is this what you use for the dog bone handle, or is that for the clips?
Uh, I actually very seldom use that particular little. I-
Okay.
that's a piece of micarta that I ground round edges on it
Yep.
for grinding in a clip where you're kind of wanting to not kind of a swoop down into the clip off the
Okay.
spine,
Yeah.
Well, that works. Honestly, I should take that picture off of there. That
Okay.
works, but it wears out the micarta pretty fast, and I
I
found that
see.
I could freehand that with just the square edge of the belt grinder,
I gotcha.
and it wasn't that hard to do. But essentially, I'm holding the knife blade down by the ricasso,
Yep.
and then just raising the blade up into the belt with my fingers and pulling it along the belt.
Nice.
Works slick, and then your angles matches on both sides. You
Very
do have
nice.
to have your bevels ground pretty much the same, your blade bevels ground in the same, or
I gotcha.
it won't match. But
Oh, whoops.
anyway, but that's one
Yeah.
of my, none of my machinery in my shop has avoided being modified.
Oh no, I
Eh,
feel the same way. I do that all the time. In fact, when I go last year at Maker Camp, I did a demonstration of handle sculpting and blade grinding. The first thing I did was modify some of the platens
yeah,
because the way I approach it, for my approach, those modifications have to be made.
yes,
And
yes,
fortunately, the guys over at Broadback were like, I asked Ryan Broadback, and I was like, "Hey, do you have a problem with me like changing any of these platens?" He's like, "No, man, go ahead and do whatever you want." I was like, "Great!" And I just started hogging material and doing cutback angles on the back of the platen and doing all this funky stuff.
yeah.
And
That's when I teach an intro to bladesmithing class. Sometimes it's difficult for me because the machines ain't set up like mine, and it's like
sure,
I'm not sure I know how to do this.
yeah. Yeah, you got a lot of great jigs and information. Honestly, your website is a great resource, especially for newer makers, but even established makers who are willing to take the time and make their own modifications.
Well,
There's a lot of really great information. I feel like I learned a lot from cruising through and just feeling, honestly, just feeling confident. Like, because sometimes I feel too precious about stuff, and I'm like, I don't know, can I actually do that?
yeah,
And after seeing your website and seeing some of the modifications that you made to the tool arms and to the machine, I was like, yes, I can do whatever I want.
yeah,
Um, and if it screws it up, I can also fix it. And that's part of the process is like sometimes you do mistakes and you got to fix some things, but there are benefits to that kind of unintended education.
yeah. Well, I figure anything that you have to do repeatedly, or
Mhm.
anything that you find difficult to do, then you need a jig or a fixture to
Yep.
help you at that process. You, repeatability on doing the same job over and over, you need something to
Right.
help you do that. But anything that's difficult, figure out a way to make it easy and build something to help you with the work.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Um, let's see. I think Oh, Mike, I saw Mike had left a message or a comment. He said, the Bladesmith Lab sounds like an amazing opportunity. Yeah, I agree. I think that sounds super cool. And it's a really neat concept. And I'm actually surprised. I've never really heard of that before, but two, that isn't a thing that makers who have the shop space to be able to do that,
Yeah.
or if there is kind of like that was at the Texarkana school, right?
Yeah.
That so facilities that have that kind of setup and availability to do that don't, at least that I'm aware of, don't really do that.
No,
I've never heard of it.
they
And
haven't done it for years, and I would like to see one of the schools do that again. It was
yeah,
awesome. You got two master smiths standing there with all their experience to help you out. And every year I go back, come back with a different project. And once in a while, Jerry and Harvey go, but they were there with their experience.
yeah,
Maybe they didn't do it before, but they're there with their years of experience to go, well, maybe
right,
you ought to try this. And
sure,
so it was awesome.
yeah,
I mean, that'd be something I'd like to teach. I mean, if I've had the opportunity, that would be really fun.
just
I
go
think.
sit. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, and there's so many new facilities now. There's the Moran School out in Maryland now.
Yeah.
I think there's an ABS school in Iowa. Is that right?
Ohio.
Ohio,
Yeah.
which is where the Hammering was just at, right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. There's obviously the New England School of Metalwork.
Hmm.
There's is the Texarkana School still there doing the bladesmithing stuff, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
I'm trying to think
Um,
other facilities that are kind of more public facilities rather than a private shop.
what's the college in Clyde, North Carolina? I don't know if they're still doing stuff there or not.
Not Penland, is it?
No,
Or Haywood?
Haywood,
Haywood,
Haywood Community College.
right?
Yeah, I think
I
they're
don't
still
know.
there.
Yeah, I don't know if they're still doing stuff.
And then maybe I'll get thrown out of the ABS for mentioning it, but in Washington, Arkansas, the school, it used to be the Moran School, is now operated by uh, the University of Arkansas, I think it is.
Okay.
And they're teaching classes as well.
Okay.
So
It's not the Moran School anymore?
the Moran School is now at Texarkana College,
Oh, okay.
at the college itself. But there's the facility in the school still exists in Washington, Arkansas,
I see.
but it's run by the University of Arkansas.
Okay. Is there bad blood there between the University of Arkansas and the ABS?
In some places, I think yes.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, and I probably justifiably so in some ways, but
I see.
I'm not. I don't know the whole story, and so
Sure.
I'm not taking sides or trying to elaborate too much on that. I don't
That's
know,
fair.
but yeah.
Yeah, Mike is actually chiming in. There's also the Center of Metal Arts in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, which is another forging facility that does not just knives, but they do blacksmithing and both for creative as well as or like a sculptural blacksmithing as well as traditional blacksmithing techniques and
Yeah,
skills.
it's awesome.
Very cool
Yeah.
facility. I would love.
Yeah.
I still haven't been there, but I would love to go either take a class there or teach a class there. It'd be super fun.
There's a
Um,
there's a craft school in Eureka Springs, Arkansas
okay.
that Alan Newberry has taught a bunch of classes at,
Okay.
and they are doing some knife related stuff, knife making and stuff, and Alan Newberry's been teaching there.
Oh, nice. Alan's a good guy.
Yeah, they asked me about teaching there, and then I decided to have some health issues and
Ah,
haven't got back to them yet.
you're
But
so selfish.
yeah, I keep trying to die.
What are you doing? Oh,
But anyway, that Eureka Springs, Arkansas, and I can't remember the name. Go to Alan Newberry's Facebook page. He's definitely got stuff there on it.
yeah, I'm sure he's got information either from upcoming events or I guess past events to know like what the actual facility is called.
Yes. Yeah.
I want to scroll through now. Oh wait, what was I gonna say? I feel like I keep jumping all over the place. Um,
That's how
I
we
can't remember.
entertain your people.
Yeah, I yeah, I can't remember. Hopefully, maybe this might jog my memory. But while I'm trying to think of what I was thinking of asking or saying, I want to kind of go through some of your past work. And this again, these are a lot of pieces that you can see from Steve's website as well as on his Facebook page as well. Um, and these are just some of the pieces I pulled up because I just thought they were really neat and cool. And I really, on this one especially, I like the carving work on the handle. I think it's really nice. And there's some details it looks like on the belly side that you can't really see
Yeah.
super well, but it's a lot of fun
Just want to
kind
do
of
something
material
different.
movement. Yeah. Well, and talk to me while I'm kind of cruising through these, and if kind of just like what the evolution for you has been like from when you first started to where you are now and where you want to go, I guess, in the next, you know, with the rest of your career, the next couple of decades of work that you have in front of you.
Well, I don't know that I really had a plan.
Okay, that's
Whatever
fair.
caught my eye and what I felt like doing. Maybe I'm easily distracted. Maybe I got ADD or something because I can't seem to focus. I keep changing things up. Um, something that I did, an idea I had, and I think I'd have to say it's a business mistake.
Okay.
Um, I felt like it would be a good idea if I proved that I could do anything anybody else could do.
Mm, okay.
And so I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this now. Or it's like, if Tim Hancock can make this knife, I can do it too, you know.
Right.
And I would try doing pieces uh, just to prove I had a particular skill or could do a certain thing. And
Okay.
I would have so I was doing a whole wide field of different things. Okay.
Okay.
And I would have collectors come to my table like the blade show, and they would, well, no collectors, and they come over. I had to come see what you had this year. You know, I wanted to see what you built this time. And oh my goodness, look at this thing you built and all this. And then they go, well, it was great to see you again. This is some awesome work. I'm going to go buy a Bowie knife from Lynn Ray.
Oh, I
So
see, because he had like an established style.
bingo. Everybody knew I could build virtually anything, but
Right.
I didn't make a name for myself with any one particular thing.
I see.
So a collector'd find himself with $3 or $4,000 in his pocket, and he'd go, "I want a Bowie knife," and he'd run through his mind the guys that immediately come up as Bowie knife makers.
Right.
I wasn't in the list, you know,
Right.
or dagger builders. I wasn't in that list.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, he knew I did it, but I wasn't at the forefront of his mind.
Sure.
So
I guess
my
so. It's more like distinguishing, not necessarily because you obviously have your own style, but kind of becoming more distinguished in a certain line or genre of knife,
yeah,
so
get
that when
known
somebody
for
thought of a genre, you would be maybe a list, a list of 5 or 6 names that might pop into somebody's head.
yeah, get known for something.
Uh-huh.
Show you can build everything, but do something enough to get known for it,
Right.
you know? And I don't think I did that. I jumped around and well, part of it was that's what entertained me. And
Right.
so
Sure.
I jumped around trying different things and it was fun. I had a blast.
Yeah.
And it ain't like I couldn't sell any knives, but it
Right.
was something that I observed from the collectors is that, you know, they would come by. I thought they was going to buy something I had because they were just awed by what I had laying on the table. But they, they was like, "Oh, great to see you, and this is cool stuff." But I'm going down here now, you know, and
I see.
walk away, and I'd see them 4 tables down buying a knife from somebody else, and
Mm.
I was like, "Yeah, yeah." He was looking for a Bowie or a dagger or a particular hunter, and you know, can't
Right.
fault them. I mean, that's business, and I was
Sure.
looking at for me a business mistake. And so,
Right. And I guess trying to think of it from the buyer psychology perspective, like you had built up and developed enough reputation that you had no problem, like you said, selling your work. But maybe you weren't necessarily known for a particular thing, or I guess distinguished as a certain style of knife maker. And that does play into the buyer psychology of kind of like this social currency that comes along with owning a certain type of knife, like a Tim Hancock dogbone Bowie, or which he was really like, that was like his thing. Or at least
yeah,
that's what I know him for. Or Lynn Ray, especially now, is Lynn Ray's Bowie's and his X-ray knives. Like
yeah,
that is his genre. Like, and so when they're talking about it, not only are they buying work from an established maker who's a safe and good investment, but also they can, when they say I have this thing to another collector friend or somebody else or whatever,
yeah,
they're also kind of throwing that name out there in a way that has a sense of kind of social clout or social currency that goes along with it.
yeah. It's the names that pop in their head first.
Yeah.
You know, who is known for what particular thing? And
Right.
I say, you know, he's got $3,000 in his pocket to buy a nice Bowie. Who does he think of first?
Right. Yeah, and
Uh,
I mean, that is the hard part, is being at the top of that list, or being part of that list kind of in general.
yeah, you know, if you're going to do this as a business, you need to be thinking about it. And that's
Right.
the fellows I mentor that I'm telling them, like, get known for something,
Right.
do something and get known for that. But I've had a blast. I,
No,
I
and
got
it's not
I
like
got into I
you're
got into making the historic stuff, and I really enjoyed that. The Michael Price and the Searles and Samuel Bell stuff, and
yeah.
those are something I've really enjoyed making. Those, yeah,
Is
there was
this
the
some of the
Searles,
historical?
yeah,
So tell me about this style of knife because I'm actually not very familiar with this style. It does look like it has an older kind of aesthetic or more historical aesthetic and style to it, but I don't know
yes,
anything about it.
okay. The original of this knife can be found in the Alamo Museum.
Oh, okay.
The original knife was ordered by Reason Bowie, who is Jim Bowie's brother, and it was given to, I think it's Colonel Fowler,
Okay.
but it was a knife he gave to him, but it is a genuine Bowie knife. I think there's some people that speculate that it was not Jim Bowie who was a knife guy, it was his brother Reason.
Who is the maker, right?
Well, no,
Oh,
Reason just like high quality knives and
I got you.
bought knives and gave them to friends. And I've
I
heard some
see.
people speculate that Jim probably wouldn't have had a knife if his brother hadn't bought one and give it to him. So,
Right.
so anyway, this knife is in the Alamo Museum. It
Okay.
was made by Daniel Searles. So it's called Searles Bowie.
Okay.
Um, and I decided to make a replica of it. I won best historic knife at the Arkansas show with this one year. Um, Boy, that thing was a challenge.
I bet I'm even just like looking at the sheath. I'm like, I don't even know where you start with that.
uh, you know, the sheath was interesting to build. Um, the original is missing the two rings at the top for
Okay.
like tying on. The original's missing one of the rings. I
Okay.
was trying to recreate it as much as I could to look like it was new.
Right.
The original sheath is fairly thin in thickness, which they were back then. They didn't worry a lot back then at seeing that you was going to scratch your blade. I think
Sure.
they figured you was going to go skin a beaver pretty soon and scar it all up. So
Yeah.
the sheath material was pretty crummy. But often we'll make them out of leather and stuff like that, and they wind up being bulkier than originals,
Sure.
and it doesn't really look right. So this is when I made this one, I wanted to make it thin and then put a felt liner inside of it. And then, of course, the black part, that's leather. And I'm like, how am I going to do all this? So I actually created uh, on the inside of that is a Kydex sheath.
Oh wow.
I took Kydex and formed it around, well, I made a mandrel
Yeah.
that would accommodated the thickness I needed for the felt liner. Made a wooden mandrel, made a Kydex liner, and then actually
Oh wow.
stitched a leather welt into the Kydex liner.
Okay.
And then I took 4-ounce leather and I sprayed the Kydex and I wet the leather. It was sopping wet. I was like, I don't know if it's going to work. Sopping wet leather. And
Yeah.
I used 3M90 spray
Oh
contact
sure.
adhesive.
Yeah.
I sprayed the Kydex and sprayed the inside of the leather and formed the leather over it and let it dry. And there was some of the leather that I needed to peel back to put the chape part, the tip on the
Yeah.
metal part on the sheath on there.
Yeah.
And I took an X-Acto knife and cut it back where I needed to be and then tried peeling it off. And it was glued so good, I was ripping the leather in two trying to peel it off the
Oh crap.
Kydex. So even wet leather
Yeah.
with
Wow.
3M90.
I've used that before on stuff and I actually regretted it. And I had to go down to I think they do like a 50 or 30
Yeah,
or something like that.
yeah. But anyway,
Yeah.
I built that core up and then put the felt liner in it, all the metal work on it, and
Wow.
formed it up. And yeah,
That's an awesome piece. And it reminds me of like gaucho style knives you see a lot from South Americans.
Yes, it does have like the South American, Mexican, kind of Spanish influence because
Right.
that was probably 1830s,
Sure.
right in that time period, and that's what they had. When I forged that, the top of that blade has like a reverse bevel to it.
I was gonna say it almost looks like it has a dagger grind.
Yeah, it's got a bit of a reverse bevel to it. Oh, and I would throw out there, Harvey Dean actually got the museum to let him handle the original knife and
Okay.
take measurements off of it.
Oh
So
wow.
when I started to work on this, I called Harvey, and Harvey was good enough to sit on the phone with me and just rattle off all the dimensions
Oh
of
wow.
length and thickness of the blade, dimensions off the handle. So a lot of that, how I was able to build this is because Harvey gave me all these measurements. So
Yeah.
we'll throw that out for Harvey.
Thank
Uh,
you, Harvey.
where was I going? Oh, the reverse bevel.
Yeah.
So I was like, that's kind of odd. I'm not sure why Searles would have done that or whoever forged that blade, but
Sure.
I started forging it. It's really a thick blade. I forged it out of 3/8 thick 1095. It's
Okay.
really thick,
Yeah.
and so I'm forging the bevels, and I'm thinking I'm not going to forge up there at the top of it like that. I'm going to leave that and grind that in reverse, you know.
Yeah.
So I got all the forging done and held the thing up, and it's like the top side of it, one side, but it's leaning off at an angle reverse of the bevel I forged in. I'm kind of like, well, that's about the angle that I'm going to need to do that reverse bevel. I'm like, so maybe that's how it wound up that way. He
Right.
forged it just like me, and it didn't come out straight. That little half inch at the top was cockeyed, and
Yeah.
so you just go ahead and make that a feature and grind it in on the other side, and you got that reverse bevel and the ridge down the back of the blade. So I don't know. Anyway, that's how it worked out for me.
Yeah. Well, and something else that's it's a detail that's kind of difficult to see in this photograph because of the size, but I think if somebody's watching this on YouTube and they do the full screen, they'll be able to see better. But around the handle, you have these raised portions that I believe are checker filed,
Yeah.
and then they have a lot of accenting pins
Yes.
drilled and set into the handle material.
Yes.
Um, and I can't tell if it's a separate panel or if that was a relief to bring down that other material, or if yeah.
It's actually a relief panel. Yeah.
Oh wow.
I set up a jig. I made a little jig and used a Dremel with a burr in it to cut down the handle and leave
Yeah.
those raised panels. And the panels are checkered.
Yeah.
And then those are sterling silver pins, 20 thousandths diameter sterling silver pins.
Yeah.
And I, I drilled each one of those. They're only about a 16th of an inch long.
Okay.
Uh, uh, I've got a Samuel Bell knife
Okay.
that has a similar feature. On this one, I did the checkering, cut the diamonds first, and set the pins in the center.
Okay.
On the Bell, I set the pins and then cut the diamonds around them later.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, both methods suck.
I was gonna say that second one sounds like a pain because then you got to cut through the silver at the same time.
Well, you have to, you got to cut around the silver.
Oh,
You got
these
to
are so the
get all
silver is at the peaks of all of the diamonds.
Yeah, well, yeah, it would have been a peak. These diamonds were actually kind of flat top. They never
Okay.
really cut them to a peak.
Okay.
So they weren't cut that flat. It was cut with checkering tool, but I had to center the pin in the center of the diamonds, and so I had an embroidery needle and a uh, pin vise, and
Yeah.
I would do a little punch mark in the center with an embroidery needle,
Yeah.
and then I had to drill the holes small enough so the pin would drive in there. And I took a 16th inch drill bit and ground just about, well, not even 3/32 of the tip of it down to where it was smaller than the pins.
Okay. Yeah.
Was sitting there with optivisors and had it in my
Oh boy.
drum in my Fordham and handpiece and was drilling them little holes. And
Oh my God.
I had a length of sterling silver wire, and I would file a little point on it and start it in there, and then take a pair of needle nose and jam it down in the hole far as I could,
Yeah.
nip it off, and then tap it down in solid with a hammer. And
Wow.
once I got a whole bunch of them set, then come back and file them all down to the top of the diamonds. And when I was
Oh my gosh.
the customer asked me to
Oh.
build this, and I'm trying to figure out how long it's going to take me to build it. And I'm
Oh,
like,
this was a custom order
oh
too.
yeah, it was a custom order.
Oh my
And
gosh.
yeah, he got a bargain on this. Luckily, he's a good friend of mine.
Okay.
But I'm thinking about this, and I'm like, man, there must be 150 pins in that thing. There's
Oh
500.
yeah. Yeah.
The original knife, I put pins in the bottom panel too. The
Okay.
original knife does not have pins in the bottom panel.
Okay.
I put them in there.
Oh, on the belly side of the handle.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
If I'm right, I'm not sure it has them on the top panel either. I have to go back and look again, but definitely does. So the original knife does not have as many pins,
Okay.
but I put 500 pins in that handle.
Holy smokies.
And then, of course, the
You're
escutcheon
patient.
plates are the escutcheon plate too. There's on the original knife, it's only on the right side of the handle. There's not one on the left side on the original knife, but I put two in.
Right.
So those had to be inset, set
And
down.
the escutcheon plate, that's would somebody's name typically get engraved on there for a sense of ownership, or how would
Yes.
that work out?
Yeah.
I always wondered about those.
And yes, it would have. I don't remember that there's anything on the escutcheon plates in the handle
Okay.
on the original.
Yeah.
If you can't hardly see it on this. The section, the upper right picture of mainly the handle and a little bit of the blade.
Yeah.
If you can see right or see up in there, there's a gold inlay in the spine up there.
Okay. Oh yeah, just barely. Yeah.
It's about 2 inches long. It didn't really, you don't see it in here.
Yeah.
On the original, it has that gold inlay, and it has Colonel Fowler's name up there in
Oh
that
wow.
gold inlay. So,
I
but
got you.
you had to cut the channel out, and then cut the little turn up little burrs in the bottom of the channel, and
Right.
hammer a gold wire into it to fill that up. So that
Oh
is
my
up
gosh.
there, like the
Yeah.
original.
That's
So
wild.
yeah,
That's an intense piece.
it is. Yeah.
Well, and another one that's really great, kind of along this lines, I think, is another historical piece.
Yep. That's a Samuel Bell. Yeah.
Okay.
Same thing. Now, yeah, that one I set the pins and then cut those are actually little squares and not exactly diamonds, but
Okay.
again, same thing. The sheath on that,
Mm-hmm.
wow. Wow.
Especially
Samuel,
with the swage on it.
yes,
But
because the swedge on a bell knife is only from one side. It's a chisel grind,
oh wow. Okay.
but his sheaths are shaped the same, taper the same, like to match the bevel grinds on the blade.
Okay.
So it's not rectangular like a Michael Price or something like that. It's
Oh
got to
wow.
match the bevel. And so making a sheath like that, wow, that was a job. I made a comment. Harvey Dean has made a couple of those, and I made a comment on my Facebook page about what a challenge it was. And Harvey said, "Yeah, they're hard on a man," and it is. That
Yeah.
was kind of a compendium of artistic things that Bell
Okay.
did on a variety of his knives. That that's like a knife that Samuel Bell could have made, might have made, and
I see. Okay. I like those. That's
yeah,
cool.
it's all represent, even the engraving as bits and pieces of engraving, and he did that himself. You can look at Bell's knives and you can see he used the same artwork here and there on a number of his knives. So
Okay.
taking the liberty of using his artwork off a variety of his knives and sheaths and putting it on a single item was plenty logical in my mind. He
Yeah.
did it, I did it. So, but That's
That's
what that
great.
one was about.
Well, and also what is really, I mean, all of it's very interesting, but the transition from the blade to the handle
Yes.
is geometric, which I feel like I don't feel like I've actually really seen that before.
Yes. They're little octagons.
Yeah.
Or
And that was but that's all part of it's is that integral
yeah.
or yeah, wow. Okay.
I'm not sure any of us really know how Bell did that.
Okay.
How I did that, I had measurements off of Bell knives, and Mark Zaleski helped me out with a lot with photos
Mm,
and dimensions that he took.
yeah.
Those little octagon pieces, I think there's six of them.
Okay.
Um, those were actually cut from flat stock.
Okay.
The round part that they're on, that is a piece of. I turned it out. It's actually a tube. The There's a round tang from the blade that goes down that tube. It's very thin stock.
Mhm.
And then each of those octagon pieces were drilled at a diameter that would fit on that. And then basically I had the little octagon patterns, the different dimensions that I ground them to an octagon around the circles that I had drilled in the stock.
Sure.
And then all of that's silver soldered together into stacks and soldered onto that tube. So
Oh,
it's
wow.
different thicknesses of stock and different outer dimensions as you can see in these octagons. So
Wow.
that's how I went about it.
And Mark Zaleski, he owns Knife World magazine,
Yes.
right?
Yes. Yeah. He's a owner, editor, and he has a really nice, amazing collection of antique knives of all varieties. And he
Sure.
was at the Ohio Super Hammer in here, what was it, a month ago, whatever.
Yeah.
And he joined me on doing my demo, but he brought a lot of his knives and we examined those, and so that was really cool. Mark's a cool dude.
Yeah, he's
Yeah,
interesting. The first time I met him was at Eugene, Oregon, the
yeah,
Oregon Knife Collectors Association show several years back. I think in 2014 or 2015, and yeah, he was just constantly. I just saw him constant. Like every once in a while, he was stopping talking to somebody, but usually when I would see him, he was like walking across the show, like very determined, like he's got it somewhere.
yeah.
Um,
He
but
always
yeah,
looks like he's on a mission, don't he?
he always looks like he's on the mission for sure.
I think he is,
Yeah.
but he's a cool guy. But he helped me out a lot, and I've got there's a Michael Price style knife on there. I think it's in the Bowie gallery.
Okay.
But the sterling silver wrap frame handle, and that's what I was doing the demos on at the Ohio show.
Let's see.
It's in the Bowie gallery at the very top one, I think.
Yeah, I think I have that pulled in here. It's not this one. Oh, here we go.
Yeah, that one there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so when I had that Samuel Bell blade, I was contemplating about what I was going to do, and I had some of those handle pieces to make a Michael Price wrap frame handle like that.
Yeah.
And I was contemplating putting that handle on the Samuel Bell blade. I thought,
Oh,
why wouldn't have Bell considered that? They were kind of same time period. Why wouldn't have Bell considered that? But so I took the parts, and I knew I was going to see Mark at some knife show.
yeah.
I took the two pieces down there, and I got Mark over my table, and I slid the two pieces together, and I go, "What do you think?" I said, "You're the only guy that can convince me not to do that." And Mark looked at it and kind of screwed his face up, and he goes, "Don't." He goes, "Don't do that." No,
Take them apart.
yeah, yeah, take that one. Don't do that. I'm like, okay, so I
That's
won't
funny.
do that.
Is this also another Price style?
Well, that's actually the handle piece that I put on the Samuel Bell and showed Mark, and
Okay.
Mark was like, "Don't do that," and I was like, "Well, I've been wanting to do this on a Bowie too, so yes, that is the wrap frame handle style." And
That is so cool.
that knife wound up in China, but I thought, to me, I thought that came out pretty cool.
I think it looks pretty damn cool.
Yeah.
I think
What,
that's pretty good.
what's wrong with putting a 150-year-old handle pattern on a modern Bowie blade?
Nothing.
I think I come out slick. I like that.
I think it
I
came
was
out
like, I
good.
need to do that again.
Yeah. Well, and imagine, like, I could see it having kind of like the what is that, a Spanish notch down
Yeah.
at the,
Yeah.
so having that down at the I mean, honestly, it kind of reminds me of what's going on in the dog bone.
Yeah.
Having that Spanish notch, I feel like it couples very nicely with the ricasso, and then that transitioning into the price handle would pretty dang slick.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's lots of opportunity there. You know, that I did that demo in Ohio on the wrap frame handle
Hmm.
making and the metal sheaths and stuff, which
Yeah.
that's not so complicated, but you don't see many people making the wrap frame handles, and I think they scare people out of trying it. And to me, they're not that hard to build. I'm like, so
Well, and it involves silver soldering, right?
yeah, well, the handle doesn't have to.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
You can do the handle without silver soldering. I
Okay.
mean, there's some fittings inside of it.
Yeah.
One in the back that's probably would be better if you silver soldered it, but you don't have to.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm trying to remember if I did any. I don't think I did any silver soldering at all on that handle.
Oh,
I,
wow.
I used a high. There's a fitting on the inside. The nut on the back
Yeah.
holds the back end of the handle together.
Okay.
So there's a metal fixed fitting that you got to solder into one side
Uh-huh.
that overlaps at the back where the nut is.
Yeah.
You want a good high strength solder for that, but it doesn't have to be silver solder.
Sure.
But I really feel like those handles are not that difficult to make,
I
and
see. Interesting. So the wood, when we're seeing the wood, it's kind of more of a like an inlay or a panel.
yeah, it's just a panel.
Oh, that is
I'm
so interesting. Okay.
I'm not exactly sure how Price put his together. I ain't seen one of his tore apart. Or Steve Rapp makes a
You
lot of
didn't
them.
go to destroy one?
Yeah, yeah,
Let's
yeah.
just destroy this and take it apart and see how you did this.
But I make a micarta core. No,
Okay.
and
I'll pull
a,
this back up again.
a solid. Yeah, I don't know that I got. There's a video out there somewhere of me doing a demo on that, making
Okay.
those. But I do a solid micarta core that's a half an inch thick. The tang goes through it, and
Yeah.
then the two frame handle parts have to be made on a mandrel. You got to hammer them over and make them all up.
Yeah.
But that micarta core goes with that handle through the whole construction process, even the engraving that I do on it when I take it down and put it in my vise for engraving.
Yeah.
Once I get the whole handle framework all done, I take that micarta core and I mill like 90 or 100 thousandths off of each side of it,
Okay.
and then glue my actual handle material on the two sides of the micarta core. So the handle material's not that thick. It's
Right.
100 thousandths or less
Oh, wow.
glued to the core, and then all of it goes back together again.
That's so interesting.
And the pins don't go through the handle. They just go through the well, and most of my the handle material I put on, like the wood there or the ivory on the micro price
Yeah.
style that I had,
Yep.
the handle material is sitting on a piece of titanium, 20 thousandths titanium.
Okay.
So then I've got something on the back side of the handle material to peen the back ends of the pins. Those are dummy pins,
Yep.
peened over on the back and only go through the titanium and the whatever's left of the handle material.
Wow. And I got actually, I'm going to do another screen share back to your website because you do on your tutorial page, you have
Yeah,
the jig.
yeah. That is for a single one piece wrap frame handle.
Okay.
and I've got a dagger that I've done on one. You got to be careful not to put too sharp of corners on them because you got to get the mandrel out and your handle material back in.
Right.
But again, I do a micar to core in that,
Yeah.
and then apply the material later. There should be another picture there of, if I've
Yeah.
got that one, of the, no, that's still the, gosh, yeah, that's the single. Don't I have the, do I not have the Michael Price on there somewhere? Maybe I don't. Boy, I need to go back and maintain my website, don't I?
I mean, you got a lot on there.
There's Forge Building.
Yep, forge build. Yep, all your cool forges. Let's see.
Well, anyway,
Yeah.
so
Yeah, I think that's the only handle one that you got on there.
that's weird. Okay, I should do better.
I think you're doing great. Honestly, anything that you're willing to share, anything honestly that anybody's willing to share is great. I think there are still people out there kind of gatekeeping in a way, and the reality is like we all only have so much time on this world, right?
Yeah.
And something I think about, which is I don't know, I don't think it's necessarily morbid, but I'm still young. But the reality is, and I've lost people that are my age. Like
Oh, yeah.
accidents happen, people get in car accidents, things happen, and people are lost. And it's what good is anything that's up in here if it goes with me? And so that's part of what. And honestly, like your page has inspired me to do more work to share. It was your page. It was definitely Nick Wheeler and what he would share and talk about through his videos, and those things inspired me to do more to share some of my process, um, because again, you just never know when your time's up, and what good is it if it goes with you? It's not
Well, that's
benefiting anybody, and we all have so little time in this world anyways. Why not work together to try to help each other out to get more out of this life? um why
well,
not?
that's yeah. It's like the Damascus gun barrels. I have so much time invested in that,
Right.
and I've gained so much knowledge that wasn't easy to learn. I'm like, I don't want to see it lost again
Sure.
because I put so much effort into coming up with the knowledge, But
Yeah.
really, there's limited places for me to share it, and so I'm trying to dump a lot of stuff over to Doc Drew so he can put it up on his.
Mm,
But
sure.
you know, even him, what happens to Doc Drew's website? I mean,
Right.
we all got limited lives here, and
Yeah.
be
and,
gone
and he's the one
someday.
that's got the Damascus Knowledge website, right?
Damascus knowledge, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that is a, because it's like I wonder if there's somewhere, and Mike actually might be a good resource, Mike Poor,
He's
but
he's
somewhere
bailing,
to. Yeah, he had to take off, but he
yeah,
said thanks. But there's got to be somewhere where some of these things can be archived, kind of in a way, kind of to continue to be kind of a living document in a way that keeps track of these different knowledge and techniques, or even links to like the Thor program, or like that Damascus barrel making video, like stuff like that, as every day, honestly, every hour, so much more information is coming out. Those things get buried and lost.
yeah. They
and
do.
and so it's trying to figure out how to archive that in a meaningful way somewhere where it can continue to be added to and not just be lost because somebody passes away and then no longer maintains a website. If it's part of an organization, honestly, like the ABS, where it can continuously, the ABS doesn't end when somebody passes away, it gets passed on to the next hands. And I think that's one of the great things about it. And so if work was being done either through their website or through their organization to help with preserving some of those documents and that information, I think that would be really pretty dang handy for people to have
Yeah,
as a resource to come back to, really.
I know Doc Drew's putting his stuff, Damascus knowledge. He's got it on Google Docs, and
Hmm.
maybe there's a way that stays there.
Yeah. I don't know.
I don't really know. I don't know enough about all that. I don't know enough about any social
I don't.
media, computer stuff.
Yeah,
So there's that. But I don't know if our knowledge could be loaded to something
yeah.
semi-permanent.
I don't know. Where does it go?
Yeah, I
Like
don't
even
know.
for me, if I were to, God forbid, get in a car accident today as I drive to the shop, what happens to any of my pages and any of my stuff?
Yeah,
Well, any of that is, you know,
we are but a mist.
we are but a mist for sure. Well, we've been on here for 3.5 hours.
Yeah,
I,
man.
I think we did a great job sharing and talking a lot and sharing a lot of great information, honestly. And I thank you for all that you've very generously offered and talked about, and that you have in the past. And you, again, people should be going to your website, culverknives.com. Sorry, culverart.com.
Yeah.
You're also on Instagram and Facebook. Is it
Well, don't count on Instagram.
okay? Well, you're on Facebook at
I'm on
least,
Facebook.
Steve Culver. And I'm not sure, is your
Oh,
Facebook page, is it also Culver Art or is it Steve
uh,
Culver?
it's just Steve Culver. I have
Okay.
a business page, but honestly, I don't
Okay.
maintain it very well. And
All right.
I mean, there's stuff on it, but you can see all you'd want to see on my website.
Right.
But I'm debating what I need to be doing here and move, well, like we're talking about. Where should I be moving my stuff and what should I do with it? But
Yeah.
maybe I'll make a decision.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Well, and there are websites. Actually, so Don Fogg's website is basically gone now. He didn't keep that up.
yeah,
But somebody somewhere down the road, um, say, what is it called? The internet. I think it's called Internet Archive or something like that. But you can archive pages, and
oh
so you can still go visit his website as it looked, at least in like the late '90s.
wow,
Um, and so, and it's just like, I don't know who is paying for this information to be stored, but
yeah,
and maybe it's a nonprofit organization or something like that, but it's basically the idea is that it helps to preserve information like that. Again, I know Mike had to leave, but maybe he'll catch this last bit and he can help give some better ideas, or maybe anybody else who's got some concepts and ideas for how to preserve some of this information, because um, it would be unfortunate, for especially since you've done so much work, to rediscover kind of the process for making those gun barrel
yeah,
damascus. I mean, that's super great. I think it's super great and super cool, and it would be a bummer for it to get lost again, um, somewhere down the road, So,
yep.
anyways, I just want to thank you
Thank you.
for coming in here, spending some time chatting with me. I want to thank everybody over on the Patreon for their constant support that helps make these conversations a reality. Um, and I especially want to thank our super sponsors. Again, this month we have Josh Smith at Josh A. Smith on Instagram. We have Gabe Fletcher. Gabe is at Anchorage Forge on Instagram. We have Lawrence Lake of Maritime Knife Supply at maritimeneknifesupply.com. Russell Tinsley is at Can't Make Knives, also at Ouzel Finch Beers. Michael Poor, who is joining us for this conversation throughout, he is at Red Dragon Forge on Instagram. Tony Sazma is at TNT Forge on Instagram. Eric Kidwell is at District 202 LLC. And Dan Hubbs is at 66 Mountain Knives on Instagram. Go give these guys all a follow. They're all great dudes, doing good work and helping to really, again, make this podcast a reality and the Patreon a reality. And so that's it. I just want to say thank you to everybody. Thank you to Steve one last time. And we're going to call it a day and let everybody get back to business as usual. I wish you all the best. Stay safe. Let the people know who you love know that you love them. And well, I'll see you again another day. Bye bye.